Science and morality on their side. So, with that, welcome, Senna. Welcome back to Grand Theft World. I want to thank you for taking the time this evening and making me aware of this individual named Bill Foege. So, how are you doing this evening?
Good. Thank you for having me.
We always have such
Exciting.
interesting discussions together, as we sometimes monopolize the town
Yeah,
hall.
I wish it wasn't about some horrendous person.
That's true. We save
I
our
don't even know yeah.
right. What got you interested?
I
Actually,
don't even know how, yeah. So I don't even know how I really fell into that wormhole, and it was very strange. Last November, I'm I'm Turkish, so I read the Turkish news, I read the European news. Last November, I'm watching the Turkish news, and everyone's constantly talking about how Bill Gates is in Turkey and he parked his yacht there for months. So, whatever, who cares? What is he doing there? He's apparently buying some property, whatever it is that he does. And then he's having these meetings. And these meetings are with government officials. And while he's there, sometime in January, they declare in Turkey, oh, by the way, all cow farmers or all cattle farmers will now have to vaccinate their cows with cowpox vaccine, which is vaccinia. And this just came from out of left field because there's no reported cases, no sick cows, nobody's getting sick, nothing's happening, but now there's a mandate, and if you don't vaccinate your cow with the cowpox, you can't sell it. So all these people are now forced to vaccinate their cows. So I started digging into this because, why not? So
these are Turkish government officials, right? So he's meeting with Turkish government. Bill Gates is meeting while he's there, maybe buying property, dealing with his yacht. He's meeting with Turkish government officials, and all of a sudden, is it legislated and through Turkey's sort of government process? Oh, okay, to have the vaccine.
And it's mental. Like all of a sudden, it just came from nowhere because I don't know any cow farmers in Turkey, but people are constantly going, why is there a mandate on cowpox vaccine all of a sudden? Which reminded me, 10 years ago or so, there was a fowl pox, which is, they can't call it chicken pox, but it affects mostly chickens. There was a purported fowl pox outbreak. It was never proven. There were no sick chickens, nothing like that. But what they ended up doing was mandated that all the chickens of that certain Anatolian kind, this is like thousands of years old, this heirloom chicken type, they killed all of them. They burned them. There was no sickness. And now that entire genus is eradicated. And
which, by the way, probably had the best genetics to survive in that region, Anatolia.
Probably. I mean,
yeah, that's something about heritage breeds, that they may not produce the most meat or the eggs, but they do have a susceptibility or the ability to survive in certain regions more so than other ones. That's tragic beyond all belief, but not surprising.
So, yeah, and these are smaller types. They don't grow too big. So, how you buy chicken nowadays, if you buy it at regular stores, I look at it and the chicken pieces are like that big. They're big as turkey pieces. Giant. So it doesn't make any sense. So these are smaller chickens. Anyway, so I started digging into this, and in the meantime, I'm thinking about this chicken thing. It's like, yeah, it's okay. You can just eradicate millions of chickens of a certain genus, but don't worry. Polar bears are fine. The 3 polar bear pictures that we see, they're not going extinct. So whatever. So anyway,
it's the climate nonsense. And they didn't. Let me get this straight with the fowls. They didn't use PCR or anything. They just said there's the threats.
We don't know. It was just in the news, and then next thing you know, all these cows are getting vaccinated with the cowpox. There's no known disease.
Is there any connection with Gates's foundation in regards to the vaccinia virus or vaccinia vaccine?
Well, now that's where we come to that. So if you want to go into the gossip part of it, Bill Gates has so the yacht or ownership is interesting, but this guy has this super yacht parked in the western coast of Turkey, and then there's a second yacht next to it. That's for his, that's for his people who, the people who serve him. And then Bezos does the same thing. So the two of them they closed this entire beach, giant beach. They have a party there. There's this whole thing happening. They're buying property in Turkey. They're buying all this farm property of all things, which is very interesting.
That's very ominous. Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. So Bill Gates ends up buying this enormous farm property where he's going to do, of all things, organic farm.
Is that where he's planning on living after he completely crashes the rest of the West?
Who knows? I don't even know. I mean, it's just so stupid. I mean, doesn't he own a giant chunk of Monsanto, this guy?
Yeah,
anyway, yeah. So anyway, that's what's happening. So this is where we come to Bill Foege. That's his name. And so I'm digging into pox because I was telling you, I think back in November, we need to put our focus on pox because I'm constantly hearing pox this, pox that. Then I start looking in, and turns out Bill Gates has been writing and talking about pox of all kinds, smallpox, cowpox, whatever pox, since the early 2000s. So, interesting. So you start going in, and as it comes out, there's this guy named Bill Foege. So who is this guy? His claim to fame is that he's credited with eradicating smallpox by the year 1979. The last known smallpox episode was reported was May of 1980. So it is declared completely gone.
Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. Let's just unpack that a little bit. I don't know how much you know about it, but I'm just curious because
this is through CDC.
Through CDC, which then he becomes a director of in 81 or something like that, if I remember correctly.
77 to 83.
83. Okay, that's right. In the middle of that, that's when the AIDS epidemic begins or something of that nature. He's ahead of the CDC essentially at the very, very beginning intimations of this whole AIDS crisis, if you will.
Yes.
And that's a whole very strange situation. But to go back to the smallpox, do they define that by eradicating it based on the possibility of it becoming epidemic? Or is it just actual cases, having no cases whatsoever? Because I thought there have been cases since. Okay,
if you look at the CDC, they're saying smallpox is gone. However, smallpox is also kept at 4 different labs, one of them being, of all things, bioMérieux labs. That's okay.
Yeah, anyway. It's not, they didn't have a hand in setting up the Wuhan Institute. Oh, no, nothing to see.
No, not at all. And also, they make a smallpox drug. They still have 150 million doses of smallpox vaccine. There's a whole bunch of other things going on.
Which our government just bought a bunch of because of this supposed monkeypox threat. I don't know if they bought them from bioMérieux, but anyways, go for it. Go on.
I mean, we can get into that too. Yeah. There's a lot of detail there, but without going into too much detail, who is this Bill Foege guy? He's I don't know, born in the 1930s or something, whenever it was. And the important thing is and this is nature's wink kind of thing.
Yes.
He goes to University of Washington, of all things. He's not from Seattle, but he lives in Seattle. He goes to University of Washington, and straight out of college, he joins the CDC. He goes to medical school. So he has a medical degree in epidemiology. And straight out of school, he joins CDC's Epidemic Intelligence Service. So what is that, right? So it turns out CDC's Epidemic Intelligence Service is a postdoctoral fieldwork program which focuses on biowarfare, epidemics, pandemics, and biological warfare training exercises and all kinds of other warm, fuzzy, and wonderful activities. So he
was
joins.
This newly created at the time? Is this like a new thing?
I don't know.
As far as postdoctoral
I
work?
did not look into it.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, he joins it in the 1960s, and so his relevance to smallpox is during his tenure with the CDC in the mid 1960s. He's in Africa and India, and he is in charge. And they put him in charge of the smallpox eradication program. So he develops a strategy. He nicknames ring vaccination method or daisy chain method. I forget. And basically, it's contact tracing, quarantining, and then vaccinating the infected person's immediate circle of 50 to 200 people. And that's how they are saying, we got rid of the entire smallpox.
So that's his methodology by
correct.
Which they were able to. Okay. Very interesting.
So he doesn't make the vaccine. He just develops a tracking, tracing, and vaccinating system. That's his claim to fame.
Gotcha.
So according to CDC's own records, I mean, you can check this. I have all the links in here too. Smallpox was eradicated. That's it. They're saying it's gone, and it's gone forever. So earlier you said Jimmy Carter. It's interesting because he becomes the CDC director in 1977 during the Carter administration. And during the Carter administration, he becomes very good friends with Jimmy Carter. After Carter's presidency, Jimmy Carter goes on to become a professor at Emory University in Georgia. So they remain friends. So and I will come to that too, but there's an organization called the Carter Center, which is a huge part of Bill Foege's life. So anyway, from 1977 to 1983, during the Carter and Reagan administration, he's the director of the CDC. In 83, he says, okay, I'm done, gets out of there. And in 1984, and now it really starts getting like dicey. He founds his own organization with the help of the Carter Center. Jimmy Carter introduces him to the Rockefellers. So
there we go.
Right. So
here we go. 84.
I mean, yeah, 1984. I mean, come on, stop it!
Stop the nature's wink. This is a little bit. How many times did you keep winking?
Yeah, it's getting stupid at this point. Yeah. So, with the financial backing of the Carter Center, UNICEF, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, UNDP, UNICEF, WHO, and the World Bank, he starts his organization, and it is called, come on, I wrote it somewhere in here. Hold on, let me find it. It's the Task Force for something.
While you find that, for people who might be unfamiliar, UNICEF is essentially the International Children's Emergency Fund. Yes. So you have to remember, he's working in Africa in the 60s, in Africa and India, dealing with smallpox patients who are trying to develop a system or methodology by which they can track and sort of trace these individuals who came in contact, like find the individuals who are infected, then find their immediate circle they came into contact with, and then develop a sort of way to mitigate any potential fallout from the infection spreading. And he's primarily probably working in large capacity with children. So I'm not surprised to see UNICEF.
Actually, it's all geared towards children.
All geared toward, okay.
And the organization is called the Task Force for Global Health. So it's taskforce.org. And it's still extant.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the same one, isn't it? Yeah, that's still.
Yeah, taskforce.org.
That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah, task force. So he establishes this in 1984 with the help of Rockefeller Foundation and UNICEF and the Carter Center, etc. So the task force claims that they're responsible for raising the global childhood vaccination rate to 80%. They are the decision makers of how many doses of what vaccines should be given to children. They do enormous amounts of work with diseases like TB, tuberculosis, polio, river blindness, cholera. And what's now it keeps getting more interesting.
Real quick, before you go on, do they have a say in the sort of protocols that are adopted in various nation states in regard? Because in 1984, we're 2 years removed from the Vaccine Act in 1986. We're sort of didn't sort of set up the illegal vaccine court, but this, so I'm sure it's funded by private manufacturers that then want to lobby for positioning one to sort of offset their liability in this illegal, unconstitutional vaccine court, but then also expand the vaccine, what's it called, protocol. But there's the childhood vaccine list. There's a term for it that's escaping me right. But you know what I'm talking about. To which, because like before, it's like 7 to 10 for decades, and all of a sudden it expands almost exponentially every couple of years, seemingly, with more and more diseases for which children have to be vaccinated against, which seems to roll out. It extends beyond America. The vaccine,
everywhere it's coming like that. Yeah, and they
schedule. That's what I'm thinking of, the schedule, the vaccine
schedule. Yes. So now there's like 40 plus. I
think it's over 50 something. Yeah.
In the first 6 years of life.
Yeah.
It's an enormous number. And they also not employ, but in their board of directors over the years, they also have a lot of judges. But, that's where everyone can go and look at the history and however they want to approach it. I want to come back to something very interesting. River blindness. That's one of their love child situation. So as you know, these kind of organizations are also laundromats for, washing money for other organizations.
They act as a kid. It's like a metaphorical Cayman Islands, but for vaccine money.
Correct. Yes, but with, all warm and fuzzy, we're giving you vaccines, we're curing your diseases. Look how wonderful we are. That kind of
the IMF for vaccine.
It is literally that. In fact, it's the World Bank is their biggest backer.
Oh, that's right. You said the World Bank was part of the task. Sorry. Yeah. Oh my God. Okay.
To this day, World Bank pays them money. That they siphon money through this organization. I mean, how else do you explain?
And the organization, by the way, is a nonprofit, 501c3.
Of course,
I believe.
it is.
Yeah.
Of course, but you know how, and that's a thing that they tell everyone, like, oh yeah, if something is a nonprofit, it's all warm and fuzzy. It is not. By law, you only have to give back 5%. So anyway,
that's a whole the 501c3.
Yeah, I just want to talk about I just want to talk about facts here without getting too judgy.
No, for sure. Yeah. No, it's not me too. So, we both are in the same department.
Otherwise, I get.
Let's go back to this river blindness thing. So why is this one of the love child, or is it?
And this is where it gets so much fun. I mean, nature's wink, like it's slapping us around right now.
Yeah, it's sort of a twitchy. Like at this point, they're just like twitching all over the place,
So what is the cure? There's a literal cure for river blindness. It is called ivermectin.
Oh my God. Oh, that's sold on here. You sent me.
I did. Yeah.
I have it here. If I go ahead.
Yeah.
I have it.
Ivermectin. So the brand name for ivermectin made by Merck is Mectizan. And you can go to this website called Mectizan.org to see how many billions of Mectizan Merck has donated over the past 30, 40, whatever years. This drug is...
Is this it here? So this Washington Post. Oh, this is an op-ed.
Yep.
I'm sorry, 25 years.
Yeah, but you go to Mectizan.org. It's right there.
Okay, Mectizan.org. I will do that.
That's a Merck website run by the task force. Okay. So between Merck and the task force, they have donated billions of doses. They don't even know anymore. So the email account through that website is actually Mectizan@taskforce.org. So to explain the last couple of years, apparently, according to these people, ivermectin works for humans only and only in Africa And only when Merck and the task force members are laundering money, and God knows what else they're doing. But like magically, it transforms into horse paste when you ask questions or you attempt to use it in any other continent or any other context. It's a fascinating chemical compound. Like it just, first of its kind, it changes chemical structure with the power of geography.
It's magic. It's magic.
When
I mean, it basically you will it into existence by your thinking and your concepts.
Yeah.
You just
when
will
you use it here, it's horse paste.
It's horse, of course. Of course. I'm looking at this website right now. I mean, this is crazy. Because the Mectizan donation program team, this is getting into some of the people it's currently being led by. Is there a history here? So who we are?
Yeah, there is.
I'll have to find that. But if you go, you're exactly right. I mean, the disease, what is the, well, hold on, before we get to this, lymphatic filariasis and and then the river blindness. Those are the two they list. Then the fact that ivermectin, now, is river blindness caused by a parasite? I forget the specific.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, it's a parasitic disease.
That's very unbelievable. I mean, it's
just
ridiculous. Crazy.
I
know. It's just, there's so many, what's the word I'm looking for, but synchronicities here in regards. I mean, you can see what countries are focusing on it. Most of Brazil, northern part of South America, Central America, and almost all of Central Africa. Basically all of Africa, except for even Egypt in the north there. Yeah. I mean, I forgot the series of islands over here, but India as well. So like this is a major disease, essentially the third world, I assume. Mectizan.
And this is why here, all these places that you just talked about, this is why Bill Gates focuses on all those geographies because of Bill Foege's involvement with all this. Because Bill Foege has been doing this since the 70s, and he became Bill Gates's senior advisor. So
but not
that's
only that,
where he got the idea.
There's a Gates notes that you sent me. Trying to find, here's the task force on global health. I brought up all these. Here, let me put this on the screen. A story from one of my heroes. I mean, this is Bill Gates. This is a sort of adulation and consideration that Bill Gates gives this individual, how a global coalition came together to curb a crippling disease. It's probably in regards to smallpox. I assume Bill Foege is one of my heroes. Let me just read what Bill Gates says here real quick in this opening statement. Bill Foege is one of my heroes. He's a giant in the field of global health, having devised a strategy, to your point, a protocol, a strategy, a method, a strategy that led to the eradication of smallpox, and then among many other accomplishments. Melinda and I are very lucky that he has been an advisor to us since the early days of our health work. Bill is not only a great thinker and doer, he's also a great writer. He recently sent Melinda and me a fascinating note about his experience working to save children's lives with vaccines and medicine in the 1980s and 1990s. The whole thing is too long to post here, but I want to share this excerpt with you. It's a story of how a coalition came together to fight a debilitating disease called river blindness, which is caused by a parasitic worm and was one of the leading causes of blindness in poor countries. The coalition set out to deliver a drug called Mectizan, which was made by the pharmaceutical company Merck, to everyone who needed it. And Bill is telling the story is filled with twists and turns, and success was hardly preordained. Bill's note captures the power of partnerships to improve health for the poorest people in the world. It is also a good account of, it's almost like a PR stunt. Partnerships to improve health for the poorest people in the world is also a good account of all the logistical details required to pull off an ambitious goal. And it's a vivid reminder of why Melinda and I love what we do. We hope you find this story as instructive and inspiring as I do. So they don't go on, obviously, to mention that this came out in May 16th, 2014. She doesn't mention as ivermectin, but not that ivermectin had the publicity it did, obviously, in the past couple of years. But that's just one of the things that really struck me from just reading that opening there. Bill's note captures the power of partnerships. And one of the things when we played that clip in the beginning with Bill Foege is him alluding to the fact that he never believed there would ever be a situation, I wrote it down, where they could get worldwide funding, like private funding on a large scale, to be able to invest in the idea of global health. We're not just talking about like national health or something more regionally based. We're talking about like on a supranational level. that's where Bill Gates seemingly became inspired by Foege's work, which is interesting because Foege obviously worked with smallpox in the 60s and 70s in regards to places that were Bill and the Melinda Gates Foundation through CEPI and Gavi doing the R&D and development of these vaccines, such as polio or HPV. Other vaccines had been rolling out and had devastating results in many of these areas, especially in India, and also Africa. But the point is, to gain enough recognition, there's a number of issues here. The fact that Bill Foege never thought on a world stage he would be able to gain funding for it from private sources at the magnitude he's looking for, while at the same time, that whole PR stunt piece, that 3-minute piece you played in the beginning, sort of alludes to like it's all philanthropy, without recognizing that Bill Gates is making many orders of magnitude more money through essentially filtering this money and not having any sort of tax liability or tax burden, and having many other private donors, including private individuals, come in and support these efforts, because it'll also give them markets in these emerging markets such as India and Africa and the Philippines or wherever it might be, that he's making many times over what he was making at Microsoft, owning Microsoft. So there's that angle that wasn't ever mentioned, of course, is never going to be mentioned. And that's something that's been exposed. That's not, for people who want to look at it, it's pretty easy to find how much money he's making in regards to his philanthropic endeavors, compared to what he was making, when he was head of Microsoft. So it's not like he's not getting something out of this, that just beyond this feel good, like, look at me, I'm doing something good for the world, which is the way they're sort of selling it based on Foege's model. Anyways, that's sort of an aside, but it's something I sort of caught me. It's like, let's take away or sort of like cleanse our eyes of some of the fog of this PR spin they're putting on this, and understand that they don't do this just out of the kindness of one's heart. There has to be something in it in regards to not only for Bill Gates, but also for the individuals that are backing it in regards to having markets for new products to be tested or used eventually over time. So what I want to do is follow up with, there's a number of things. So this Gates notes with Bill Foege, what have you figured out or found out any information in regards to, because I could have sworn smallpox still had small outbreaks in various parts of the world. Have you, like, because I wondered. Okay.
But here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And these are important pieces there. In 1984, he starts his own organization, the Task Force. In 86, he becomes the one of the senior advisors for the Carter Center. And his Carter Center is also involved with the task force. So it's like chicken, egg, it's strange. Then he's introduced to Bill Gates's father through Washington, University of Washington. That's how they meet. And then after a while, in 1999, when Bill Gates and his wife start the Gates Foundation, actually, they don't start the Gates Foundation. It was Gates Foundation. In 1999, it is renamed Bill and Melinda. Before that, it was his parents' foundation. So,
and we know about the history in regards to his father and his ideas. His involvement in Planned Parenthood, for example, and his ideas around.
So, in 99, Bill Foege becomes the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation senior advisor, and to this day he still is, and also for the Carter Center. What's very strange is that there are other parts there that I never knew were like, do you remember Theranos?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He was introduced to that woman who was the head of Theranos, who's like, I think, Elizabeth Holmes. I think she's in prison right now.
Yeah. Which is ironic. She's in prison because the PCR cannot be used to diagnose.
Yeah.
And they were using the
PCR. And
PCR
he was her senior advisor for Theranos. He was the head of he was a board member. He was. Wait a second.
He was a board member of Theranos. So let me get this.
Yes, he was.
Was he? Hold on. So let's get this timeline. So from like 80 after 83, when he ends his being the director of the CDC, he goes and works at Emory University as a professor?
No.
Or is that Carter?
No. That's Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter goes as a professor, but then he becomes
But he
part of
has
the
his
global
Carter
task
Center.
force. Well,
Yes.
Carter has the Carter Center. He becomes a part, Foege, that is a part of the global task force, but then he also becomes a member of the Carter Center.
Yes.
So
Yes.
about the same time, roughly.
Yes.
Okay, that's
And
interesting.
also, he's also a medical advisor to Emory University.
Oh,
Global
okay, that's
Health.
the other. That's what I'm thinking of.
Also,
okay,
yes.
I see the connection. Now, Carter introduces him to Rockefeller Foundation, or essentially the Rockefellers,
Whomever,
or the World Bank was essentially not introduces, but there are other funding aspects of this global task force initiative, which would be
the World Bank, which operates on its own through the United Nations,
right.
And there's UNDP, which is the United Nations Development Fund. There is UNICEF. There is WHO in this task force, the Rockefeller Foundation, and as of 1999, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This is all in the task force's history.
Okay. Now, Bill Gates, I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball, but he steps down from Microsoft. They have the antitrust lawsuit in the late 90s, if I remember correctly, with Bill Gates and Microsoft. That's either 97, 98,
That's when he was
99.
going like this, sitting, shaking around.
Yeah, that's where you get the sort of weird, these videos that juxtapose him to like Hitler and the Olympic Games back in the 30s, all that nonsense. But yeah, it is weird. You can tell his nervousness, though, is exhibited through his mannerisms. Nonetheless, so you have that. Then it's not long after that I believe he steps down as CEO of Microsoft and dedicates his life to philanthropic work. I'm just noticing patterns, I guess, is what I'm sort of the sub theme of this episode, especially when we get to later in the episode, is going to be this patterns on patterns on patterns. Can't say anything always definitive about it, but nature's wink is almost an understatement of the synchronicities that we're noticing here. It's like LifeLog and Facebook almost, same day sort of shit. But or at least the same time frame in which they decide to engage in this sort of activity. But the activity had already been engaged upon decades earlier. So it's like he continues to develop Microsoft. Foege gets introduced, you said, through the University of Washington to Bill Gates's father. And we know about Bill Gates's father and his history of eugenics, his history of Planned Parenthood, the individuals that he has broken bread with, so to speak. That famous picture that we've shown a number of times now. I know that you can find that and bring it up once again. But nonetheless, so there's all of that sort of connection there. And then there is the situation where Foege is now on the board of this Carter's initiative, then the Global Task Force. Then he's also has some sort of connection with the global, was it through Emory University, some sort of global health initiative or study through Emory University. So it's like all these overarching connections. Then the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, he's promoted as being one of the directors, or he sits on the board of it. So it's just like
he sits on the board. Yes,
he sits on the board. So he has essentially multiple. It's like, because you can't say, because you only have man or woman only has 2 feet. He has like tentacles and all these various things. Now you could say ostensibly, well, it's because of his knowledge. Like he's like one of the individuals, maybe one of the few individuals in the entire world that has a methodology, a strategy in place that has worked, quote unquote, in the past, that then they can call upon for now rolling out a global initiative for being able to fund health and wellness across the world in regards to pharmaceutical or vaccine usage to defeat epidemic diseases. So I can see why they would sit there and say, maybe, this is why he would have this sort of prestige, this presence on all these various connecting threads. But still, it's ominous insofar as what he did. So we have to sort of trace what Bill Foege did in order to supposedly eradicate smallpox. So one of the things, again, this is why I keep going back to smallpox, is like, was it really truly eradicated? Seemingly, if we give him the benefit of the doubt, the way then in which it was eradicated was through a very pernicious top-down prescriptive methodology of essentially track tracing and databasing individuals even if it was done ostensibly for the best reasons, because smallpox is a very deadly disease, I'll give them that. It was still done. It provided a strategy for other individuals that may not have the best intentions. And I'm not going to make value judgments there, but we can see what happened with COVID-19 to abuse that type of strategy in regards to public health for a disease that's not nearly anything of what smallpox is in regards to the coronavirus, which is they're in two different ballparks as far as severity is concerned. So the fact that they're adopting his playbook and the fact that Bill Gates is alluding to him as the man that like he came up with the strategy, the vision, the protocol, the methodology that we should follow is very disconcerting because like it's a blanket following. It's not like, well, we have to determine based on evidence how we react to different types of viruses. It's like, no, here's our blanket prescription. And it's always going to be isolate, lockdowns, vaccinate, contact tracing, these sorts of elements that are very prescriptive, very dehumanizing. And this is always going to be this is the man. It's sort of almost like a Herman Kahn type of individual. It's like the think tank behind Bill Gates' then initiative that then he rolls out in support of the WHO, which he's one of two top donors alongside China. And then in support of China, which adopts this wholeheartedly in its most perverted manifestations, especially what we saw recently with Shanghai, but even early on when it first emerged out of Wuhan. So it's just, you can sort of see the sort of intellectual musings of these individuals and where Gates and other individuals get these ideas for then justifying the types of strategies that will then be implemented down the road. Of course, what we just saw. Is there any, out of curiosity, any other nuggets that should be worth mentioning in regards to Foege's interactions or his connections that I might have missed there? Oh, did we lose Senna? Am I still here? Oh, no, there you are. Oh, we lost your sound.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Nope.
Oh, there we go. You're back.
Good. Perfect. I think I missed a couple of minutes. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. I saw you froze there for a second. But did you hear what I said there? Or if not, I'm basically...
Just the last sentence I did not hear.
Okay. Oh, that's fine then. So my question to you then, is there any other... So I sort of propped him up like he's a key strategist, if you will, that comes up with this overarching methodology that's been adopted prescriptively for every single virus now, regardless of the severity of the virus, the type of disease it causes, so forth and so on. Is there any other sort of like information connections, weird elements to this individual's background? So to me, it's like a Herman Kahn. It's like the think tank behind.
Yes, there is.
Yeah. Yep. Go ahead.
In 2001, they had this Johns Hopkins University again. Who's Hopkins? Johns
Hopkins.
Yeah, they had Dark Winter in June of 2001. Apparently, of course, I woke up to this many moons later,
as most of us did.
Yeah, so Dark Winter exercise was about a smallpox contagion that was released 12 Monkeys style through evil individual actors around the same time.
And it's mostly the same script from my understanding, if I remember correctly.
Oh, yeah. It's the same script, except Brad Pitt was too young at the time, so he wasn't there. Whatever. So, but at the same time, so as I'm looking at the Dark Winter stuff, so I'm going through the archive because I prefer reading the past news through archive.is, which is a much better way of reading it than, say, looking at the New York Times archives or, Associated Press archives, because they do edit a lot of what they post. But if you look at snapshots of archived articles, there's a different truth there. So I'm
You've
looking
done
at
a good job in my real quick. So a lot of individuals in GTW, a lot of the snapshots I've shown on this have come from Senna because she'll go on archive.is to databases like in Eastern Europe and around the world that will snapshot the same article over and over again. And so you see how it's evolved from like 2014 to 2018. And then you can juxtapose it next side by side and just sort of see what language has changed. So shout out. Thank you, Senna, for not only providing that for the GTW community, but providing it with me so I can show them like how these narratives evolve, the shifting of the goalposts, fallacy of the mean. But.
And it's very important to support the archive.is type organizations, because that's not archive.org, mind you. This is a completely snapshot organization, and they are phenomenal because they are not controlled by anyone as far as I know. So they're constantly changing the website's name. It's always archive, but it's ISPH, whatever they can get. Right. And it takes snapshots of a page in time so that it cannot be changed again. I think that's how we caught what's that football? I'm terrible with football player names.
Oh, Aaron Rodgers.
Yes, Aaron Rodgers
situation with the
COVID
vaccine.
Toe. No, COVID toe.
Oh, the COVID toe. Yeah,
yes.
Right.
And
it was after the vaccine fallout, then they started making up random shit about,
Yeah, and Wall Street Journal posted that as a news article, and then they had to eat shit because everyone was like, "Are you kidding me? What is COVID toe?" Like the guy was joking. Yeah. Anyway, let's come back.
It was he's being
because I tend to swim too far sometimes. Anyway, coming back. So the Bill Foege thing
it's more like circling back. Sorry.
But I'm not a fan of circling. So Bill Foege, you know how stuck I am with this Mario family, but for good reason. And I'm not looking for epiphania, but it just finds its way. So Bill Foege is also he becomes good friends with Charles Mario, who is the current CEO, Alain Mario's father. Here's the deal. The current CEO, Alain Mario's grandfather, was Louis Pasteur's Louis Pasteur's
protege. He is his protege. Yes, exactly. Yes. Yep. And
through some whatever deal they did, they actually use the Pasteur name. So currently the Sanofi Pasteur company is owned by the Mario family.
That's what I was thinking of. I was like, Sanofi. That's it.
Sanofi, Aventis, yes. Sanofi Pasteur. They're all, anything that's Pasteur is owned by the Mario family.
Are they sort of the microbiologists, like the ones developing new?
They are like, everything.
They are everything.
They are the ones who build.
Just speaking specifically to Sanofi real quick. They like the division that Biomediu owns in regards to Sanofi. They are the vaccine division. They're the vaccine. That's what I thought. They're microbiologists vaccine. That's okay.
Yeah.
But then Biomediu does everything, from my understanding. They're kind of
everything. They build the level 4 labs.
Yeah, BSL 4.
Yes.
I wonder if they had a connection with the Ukraine too. Now I think about it. I haven't researched that, but that would be an interesting because they set up Wuhan. They were also the ones I think that did the air purification right after supposedly.
Yes.
Like why are they doing air purification? That means they kind of have, if they don't own the business of doing it, they're contracting out to other anyways. It just is weird that they have a hand in seemingly every industry that has to do with the building requirements for BSL laboratories.
Yes. So coming back to Dark Winter. So they have this Dark Winter exercise about smallpox contagion through someone taking the smallpox remaining live virus through airports, etc. All this nonsense. And then, of course, come around the same year in 2001, I think it was October, and everything was anthrax. And I'm not going to say it a third time because it might come, so you never know. So anyway, the thing is, in 2002, I have this article here, coming back to archive.is thing. There's an Associated Press agency article here. I will send it to you. It says, lab almost destroyed smallpox vaccine. This is in Philadelphia, and the date is March 29, 2002. For 3 decades.
Whoa. Wait. Yeah. 2002. Because I'm thinking of the one recently where they found the vaccinia.
2002. But hold on.
Okay, yeah. Oh, wow.
For 3 decades, 120 liters of smallpox vaccine sat in a walk-in freezer at a remote mountainside lab in the Poconos, stored at precisely minus 20 degrees Celsius, even though company officials thought the drugs were worthless. So this is the BioMario Labs in the Poconos. It is called, hold on, it's called Swift Water Biological Labs. It's owned by Sanofi Pasteur. So this is very strange. And then it talks about how the Mario company is responsible for building the first BSL-4 lab in France, and how they are one of the four labs on the planet that has live smallpox virus. I mean, what is going on here? This is 2002.
Now, is there a connection with Bill Foege and the BioMario?
Okay, so Bill Foege was friends with Charles Mario, who died a couple of years ago at the age of like 90 or something. Yeah. And he was also their advisor for their
okay.
I mean, come on,
give me a break, right? The guy who eradicates smallpox. The question that should be on everyone's mind, and please don't do that, cat. I see where my cat is starting to go. She's already started. Is why, after eradicating smallpox, are we keeping a live virus in vials? Essentially, not only in America, Poconos, this would be either New York or Pennsylvania. So this would probably be outside Philadelphia, be Pennsylvania. Why are we keeping like a vaccinia virus, and they're running drills about the release? I guess this is through bioterrorism then, of smallpox, but it's been eradicated. Most people are, in fact, immune to it because of the vaccine schedule includes smallpox vaccine. So there's something sort of amiss here in regards to, if we've eradicated it and we have a vaccine for it and it's part of the childhood vaccine schedule, then how can you envision a situation where it will get out and infect people, especially people who have already been infected? Because most of the, like Dark Winter went over, it's not like we're just dealing with third world, from my understanding. Like they're talking about like a spread across the entire world, becoming pandemic, sort of meaning world or all. Course. So that's what's strange, is like that would mean it'd have to be altered in some capacity. I'm just that what it's alluding to, or what can be safe to deduce, is that there must be something that's different about this, or the smallpox vaccine that we take maybe enhances the potential of receiving this type of pap. But then again, something would have to be different about this one. And that's what's so strange. Because my question I keep coming back to is like, I could have sworn there are still smallpox, and I could be wrong about this because I haven't researched it in quite some time, but they're small, not epidemics, but breakouts of smallpox in impoverished areas. Maybe I'm thinking of polio, or maybe I'm thinking of various other diseases, herpes, whatever. But I could have sworn there are still issues in regards to some aspect, but maybe there isn't. Maybe it really has been, quote unquote. But then if it's been wiped out, why are they running, as I mentioned, simulations, or talking about the ability for other types of, within the same species, like, or a different same genus, different species of smallpox? So there'd be like monkeypox now, or horsepox, or cowpox that you alluded to earlier. So like, what's going on with that? Like it's just very strange that at the same time, which has been eradicated, they're preserving it and running scenarios. In 2001, 2002, they have live attenuated live virus that they're storing at minus 20 degrees Celsius in the Poconos. It's probably not the only place, I imagine, because in 2021, or was it 21 or 22? Was it the beginning of this year? Or I think it was December of 21. We had the situation outside of Philadelphia Airport where there is I forget who owned it, as a vaccine research laboratory. I forget if it was Pfizer or if it was, Pfizer is a marketing branch, but something of that nature that controlled it, that they found vaccinia. But it wasn't there. It was near the airport. They found the vaccinia sort of vaccine, and they found polio. But again, these are just vials that were labeled that, right? If I remember correctly from the story. So then I found vials that were labeled that. The CDC was called in to, because control the situation. They took it, and we don't know what's happened since then. But I could have sworn that was December of 21. So again, we have the situation. Go ahead.
I'll read you something else from 2019. This is Tuesday, 29th October 2019. This is from the Independent.
Okay.
Lab worker accidentally injects herself with genetically modified strain of smallpox virus. 26-year-old lab, yeah.
No, go ahead.
26-year-old lab employee accidentally injected herself with a smallpox-related virus during an experiment, U.S. health experts have said. So the San Diego resident began working with the vaccinia virus, which is related to smallpox. I mean, this is such stupid wording because it's not related. Vaccinia is the vaccine. It's
the live attenuated vaccine. It's like the elements, the genetic structure. It's like a part of the virus that's been deadened that doesn't cause the disease that your body will still attack alongside the adjuvants in order to create the antibodies, et cetera, et cetera.
So the vaccinia virus is used to make smallpox vaccines, it says, and then it goes on. Smallpox vaccines contain a live virus and can often lead to a lesion at the vaccination site, which usually heals, et cetera, et cetera. And it goes on. And this is like CDC people reporting on this. And then she was supposedly injecting a mouse in the lab and accidentally injected the virus into her finger.
Yeah, I was going to say she missed the one with the finger. That was my first thought.
Yeah. I mean, this is in 2009.
No, but you said something very important there. And I go back to the deductions I was having earlier, really questions that led to my chain of reasoning is like, so why would they keep this vaccine in the first place in 2001, then run the dark winter scenario in 2001?
And why are they genetically modifying it?
That's the point. That's the point.
She's messing with a genetically modified strain of smallpox virus. Why?
That's right.
This is 3 years ago. Why are you doing this?
That goes
absolutely back. No point.
So that goes back in 2001 or whatever it was when they fought 20 degrees Celsius, Poconos, clear waters or whatever it's called, laboratory, Swift waters, I think. Nonetheless, it was why keep it? Like, it's the same thing. It's like, why keep the bacteria that causes the bubonic plague, right? Like, why preserve this? Like, why not just eradicate it completely? What's the important? Like, research. But then as you're researching it, you're going to manipulate it in some capacity, even if it's just ostensibly truly for research to understand the nature of the virus, the way they sort of claim the way they sort of got around the whole gain of function thing. It's like, well, it's just to understand the nature of how it becomes infectious, not because we're trying to make it infectious. But they're clearly then saying in 2019 in that article you just quoted from the Independent, but we genetically modified it. Why? Like, what's the goal there? Because that would be, and to the point of, I remember this, I'll find this article in a second. This is a Senate memo that was sent out in 2018 stating that, like, because of modern techniques that are available, and I think this is before CRISPR technology, but we're talking just like chimeric processes, which is like taking humanized cell lines, putting them into animals like mice, and then injecting them with various viruses to see how then through natural selection, they mutate and sort of interact with one another and become a sort of chimera of various genetic nucleotide sequences that then make it more pathogenic or have different effects. Because the Senate memo that was sent out essentially saying, like, well, we could have horsepox. This is 2018. And then, like, we could have the big thing now is monkeypox, which they had a simulation for apparently in 2020, 21, whenever it was. And then Bill Foege, did he say anything about? Does he have anything to mention about monkeypox or anything of that nature? Does it just smallpox?
I don't know, but there might be videos of it. I just stopped after a while because reading all this, it's like a joke.
Yeah.
Because you keep going, and then another thing in 2013. Here's a New York Times article. Wary of attack with smallpox, U.S. buys up a costly drug. Small company Siga Technologies developed the drug in recent years. They got paid $463 million by the U.S. government. BARDA paid them, of course. But BARDA is the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, and they are under the HHS, which is Department of Health and Human Services. That drug is called Arrestivir. So why is the federal government spending $463 million for a drug that for a disease that was already gone?
Got it.
Why are they buying $463 million? And then this year, there's another, FDA just approved a drug a few months ago called Tembexa for, again, it's a cure for smallpox. It was owned by Emergent Biosolutions. It was owned by Chimeric. They got sold to Emergent Biosolutions for like $340 million, like a couple of weeks ago. What is happening here? Why is everyone all of a sudden in the smallpox, drug business?
For a disease that's been eradicated.
In 1980, 79.
79,
yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's just the fact they're keeping these viruses in laboratories designed by Biomilieu, or Sanofi owned it, I guess, the vaccine department of Biomilieu. In fact, the Biomilieu is essentially a company that sets up BSL-4 laboratories, like the entire infrastructure of such. They have their hand in a bunch of different industries in regards to being able to set up these laboratories, which are very complex. You think about all the various specializations and various contracts or contractors sort of that are needed in order to create a situation where you can house viruses and bacteria and God knows what else that can cause all sorts of diseases. The only guess then is I would deduce that there's an unholy alliance insofar as the continuous studying and all the evidence, like let's look at COVID-19. The preponderance of evidence points to the Wuhan lab. We can't say for certain, but that's if we the various theories that exist, the most seems to exist around the idea of it being, if not released, accidentally released, if you will. And what's strange about it from a Wuhan lab, but then there's genetic manipulation going on. Now, ostensibly, again, this genetic through zoonotic emergence, through things like what was Peter Daszak's company, EcoHealth. They're studying these viruses, utilizing principles, methodologies, techniques that can make them more infectious. That's what we call gain of function. There's multiple ways to do gain of function. One is chimeric processes, which is what they were doing in Wuhan. The other one is doing what that Chinese scientist did a couple of years before, if I remember, or a year or two before the whole Wuhan, the whole COVID-19 situation emerged, which was use CRISPR. CRISPR is a much more direct way of doing genetic manipulation. My friend that worked in the genetic sciences, and he was ethically abhorred by what the scientists did, which is basically make a baby, I think, in utero. Maybe before that? No, it had to have been utero. Essentially, no, I don't know. I forget. Early on in stages of pregnancy, or right before pregnancy, or in the early stages of pregnancy, create a situation where the child was immune to AIDS. Now, the problem with that is you affect one gene, you affect a cascade of genes. Genes are sort of interconnected. There's not just like one isolated gene for each disease and each situation. It's they call a polygenic score that you take, and there's like very subtle mutations on gene expressions that are sort of connected together like dominoes. So you affect one, you affect all of them. This is very disconcerting because even if they really are just trying to manipulate laboratories in a virus, ostensibly, truly, or not even ostensibly, truly to find infectious pathways, how they can emerge in zoonotic situations, you're just creating a situation where over time you're going to have, this is sort of like law of entropy sort of stuff, an accident is going to happen no matter what. And now you've created a situation where you're no longer dealing with the original virus. Hence why if you're keeping this stuff, it's like keeping it. Why? Why keep it unless you're going to research? And if you're going to research it, you're going to manipulate it in some capacity. Now, the nefarious arguments is on purpose because there's markets for it. There's drug markets, there's vaccine markets. So why not have continual revenue through this? Now, I can't state that for certain. I have to be careful there, but there's obviously that's a reasonable theory. Let me put it out there. That's a reasonable chain of deductions that one could assume logically. I want to point out real quick to what Sana was just saying about some of these connections. I brought this up before. Oh man, many GTW episodes ago. This is second session on examining. I apologize for the format. They changed this. This was not in the format originally. Senate hearing 115-720. I think I played this recently, actually, but I'll do it again. From the U.S. government publishing office, facing 21st century public health threats, our nation's preparedness and response capabilities is part 2. Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, so forth and so on. Second session, January 23rd, 2018. Moratorium was lifted in 2017. So I just want to search here for horsepox. We are also now in an era where there is incredible power in biotechnology and science, as power is almost entirely for the good, with the development of new medicines, better agriculture, improvements to the economy, and more. But with every new technology, we need to acknowledge the potential downsides of accidental or deliberate misuse. It is not possible to engineer new traits into old viruses. For example, it is becoming possible to take the lethality of one virus and combine it with the contagious qualities of another virus. And last week, scientists published research showing how they synthetically could create horsepox, a close viral relative of smallpox. We don't have the oversight system we need to fully understand or manage these kinds of developments yet, either in the US or internationally. Whatever we do about this, we need to ensure that we don't slow down science that drives so many good things forward. But we also can't ignore, there's my cynicism, but we also can't ignore that new risks are becoming possible. So they're admitting that scientists have actually manipulated, if not smallpox itself, a close relative, horsepox, or showing how they can synthetically create horsepox, I guess, from smallpox. So in other words, we're keeping these viruses to play with them. So scientists can play with them. Again, even if it is just for research. Either that's ostensible or not. Ostensibly, then we can say it might be there's nefarious activity behind it. They'll claim it's for research, but then there's other reasons that we saw, for example, with Wuhan. And what went on with that and all of these shady connections with the NIAID, Moderna having patented the nucleotide sequence that's part of their vaccine for the very thing that then was released, just vaccine modernization in 2019. That President Trump signed, as well as what was that? Spacing on there's an event that took place, but they're talking about, if only we had a worse pandemic. If only we had a worse pandemic. What was that called? The Milken Institute. So there's all, it's not too crazy to say that there's some very strange situations. The problem I have with the Bill Foege, besides his ominous connections, is this idea of him supporting initiatives for gaining private sector support for global health initiatives. I never thought it was possible. I never thought we could do this. No one would ever care about global health. I would really like to, at some point we might have to do a deep dive into his early, if it's even available, his early education, his early influences before or just about the time that he got into smallpox research. And real quick, Senna, when was it in the 60s, 70s, late 60s, early 70s? Through what university? What was that whole situation? Oh, no, it was postdoctoral work. What was that again?
It's called, hold on. Let me open up my notes because I can't remember everything anymore. I'm old.
If you're old, then my brain is fried from all the drugs I've done.
It's called EIS, Epidemic Intelligence Service.
That's right. I wrote it down. That's a part of the CDC, right? No.
Can you go to Wikipedia and put up their Wikipedia page? You must see their logo.
So what's it called again? Sorry, it's
Epidemic Intelligence Service. They are a CDC arm, so they are fully a CDC organization.
Okay.
Please show their logo because I really want everyone to see that.
Is this it right here?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Actually,
a foot stomping on the planet.
On the world.
Yeah.
It's like, obviously, I guess they want to have a footprint over the whole world. Is that the nice way of saying it?
I mean, a little subtlety. What is that? I'm all about subtlety. What is that?
You would think, right? You would think that a foot on the world might not look so good, It's like a knee on the neck. Just the optics look bad,
Get two more people in the room. Ask them, like, should we do it this way? And also, they are responsible for the whole Zika nonsense, these idiots.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in because Tony, a few months back, I had asked you if you were familiar with the EIS because the first place I ever heard of it was actually from the School Sucks podcast several years ago.
Shout out to Brett.
And Brett was talking. I couldn't tell you which one it was. It might have been one of the subscriber only pieces, but he was kind of like. Whoever he was talking about, he's like, y'all ever heard of this? It seems like people that talk about it wind up in a bad way. But so I was doing some research, just poking around. Sorry, I got distracted by something here, but I saved a few links, and including one, as you just mentioned, the Zika, John Rappaport. There's an article here. Let's see. Zika, the CDC is the medical CIA from February 2nd, 2016, where he talks a bit about the EIS.
Speaking of which, Zika, I could be wrong on this, but I think there's a big section in Fauci, the real Anthony Fauci on that. I could be wrong. Let me see. Keep talking real quick. Let me see if I can find it on my bookshelves that are not organized.
Yeah, so the other thing I came across when I was looking up EIS was this article about a CDC whistleblower, former Navy officer named Timothy Cunningham. Now, I'll caveat this that this was posted on TorySays.com. You might recall her from... hang on, what's the documentary? The Millie Weaver documentary from Shadowgate about the election. So apparently this woman, Tori, was Sidney Powell's her a source, a confidential source.
Okay.
She was an intelligence contractor, witness.
Yeah.
So make that of it what you will. But here's this article. Hang on, is it showing for you all?
It's not. If you
sorry.
Yeah.
Here we go. I'm trying to do something different than I usually.
That's okay. You're stepping it up. There we go.
Complexity. Yeah. All right. So this is the article that was actually taken off of her site, originally published March 13th, 2020. She states at the beginning that it was purged by unknown actors along with my website's SQL file. And so, I don't know, it's interesting. She's a security expert. Who knows? Anyway, she's asking, what did Timothy Cunningham find out? It turns out that the Chinese did what they always do. They were given proprietary information from the CDC and labs at Harvard to kickstart their new research funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The new research is two-pronged. Designing the SARS virus to target specific cells that control fertility in males, almost like chemical castration. Designing the SARS virus to infect and insert protein code with retroviral applications that respond to square waves. What
was that person's name again?
Who was Timothy Cunningham. And
that was one of the main informants, or
well, yeah. So he was a CDC whistleblower, and now I haven't gone through this ahead of time. I wish I'd known EIS was going to come up, but I threw this in the GTW Discord chat, and James Jordan shared this article of his from last June 25th, 2021. Who Speaks for the Dead? And he goes through a litany of researchers that have died under suspicious circumstances.
Yeah, I've seen a number of timelines like that. Not from that, but
including Timothy Cunningham. And his article does not mention him as part of the EIS. That is mentioned in the Tory Says article. There's a Atlanta Journal-Constitution article about his death. He apparently, according to the Tory article, he had contacted people prior to death. He was wound up face down in the Chattahoochee River. So I thought I'd throw these articles in the show notes and maybe to be something for a future discussion. Give Senna and maybe James time to go over that stuff, and yourself, Tony, as well. But
I appreciate that. Thank you. Because
I would love to know. Yeah, I'd love to know more, Senna, about what you know about the EIS. And
this is amazing. See, I didn't know any of this. I was just wow.
Yeah, the EIS
so crazy.
Yeah.
Nothing. It's crazy. It makes like no actual sense.
Well, what's strange is like, what are the funding sources behind EIS? So EIS is part of the CDC. It comes with the creation. It says creation of the Epidemic Intelligence Service proposed by Alexander Langmuir, Chief of Epidemiological Services, Communicable Disease Center of the U.S. Public Health Service on March 30th, 1951. Dr. Langmuir said that it was of utmost importance of planning of appropriate defense measures against biological warfare germs, development of new detection devices, and train laboratory workers for rapid recognition of biological warfare germs. It arose from biological warfare concerns related to the Korean War, or relating to the Korean War. The EIS was organized on September 26, 1951, with the purpose of investigating disease outbreaks that are beyond the control of state and local health departments. So I mean, just right after World War I, we're in the throes of the Korean War, as the roundtable groups have been sort of perfectly situated at this point. You have now another supranational sort of agency, supranational agency coming into effect that transcends control of state or local health departments, at least insofar as finding the potential for emergence of disease. So listen to this. December 26th, this is just from the wiki. December 26th, which I believe the external links draw from the history of the website itself about this. September 26, 1951, with the purpose of investigating disease outbreaks that are beyond the control of state and local health departments, enforcement of interstate quarantine regulation, and providing epidemic aid at the request of state health agencies. Let me put this on. I was looking at another book here, so let me just reread that. So the EIS was organized September 26, 1951, with the purpose of investigating disease outbreaks that are beyond the control of state and local health departments. So again, you're seeing the pattern here, beyond state and local health departments. Enforcement of interstate quarantine regulations. So they're the ones that are coming up with enforcement. Think of the resolutions to the amendments through this pandemic treaty that was just shot down, and the whole pandemic treaty in general with the WHO. And providing epidemic aid at the request of state health agencies. So this is like the beginnings of like a WHO-like program, if you will, or organization, I should say. The Epidemic Intelligence Service's first staff members consisted of 21 medical officers from the U.S. Public Health Service. That's interesting. So, and this comes from the Associated Press. The Epidemic Intelligence Service is organized. Frederick, Maryland. So I'll look into that. The background, the EIS is operated by CDC, epidemiology, and laboratory services, as Senna alluded to. Persons participating in the program, known colloquially as disease detectives, are formally called EIS officers. They literally call them officers, as though we're talking about like a military branch here, or some sort of an enforcement branch. Or EIS fellows by the CDC, and have been dispatched to investigate hundreds of possible epidemics created by natural and artificial causes. Since 1951, more than 3,000 EIS officers have been involved in domestic and international response efforts, including the anthrax, hantavirus, West Nile virus in the United States, and the 2014-2016 Ebola epidemic in West Africa. The EIS officers begin their fellowship with 1 month training program at CDC, so forth. However, 95% of two-year term consists of experimental rather than. That's interesting. So they begin their training at the CDC in Atlanta, Georgia, but then 95% of their 2-year term consists of experiential rather than classroom training. For the remainder of their service, EIS officers, experiential. That would be Foege. That's Foege. It's postdoctoral research going to India and Africa, researching the effects of smallpox. Like that would be what that, that's an experiential sort of like learning. And he's tasked then with understanding how can we mitigate or maybe stop in the tracks completely smallpox. So the remainder of the service, EIS officers are assigned to operational branches within the CDC or at state and local health departments around the country. God, this is like a World Economic Forum, like penetrating national governments and parliaments and legislatures around the world. Placement is determined via a highly competitive matching process. CDC pairs EIS officers with public health advisor, forming a scientist, EIS officer, and operations PHA team. EIS is a common recruiting pathway into the Public Health Service Commissioned Corps. What the hell is that? That's something let's check out. EIS is the prototype in field epidemiology training programs. So that's what it is. It's sort of like, if you're an epidemiologist, you have a number of routes you can go into, but one of them is doing field research. It'd be like an anthropologist. As an anthropologist, you can go and, I don't know, be a curator of a museum, or you can go do field research and try to dig up new structures, find some ancient battleship that maybe, or maybe not battleship, but like history. You're trying to dig up history and you'd be able to show it in something like that capacity. Or you could just like become a teacher, or you could be a curator. There's not many avenues. This is getting people on the field. This is the extension of taking people and putting them in the public health spaces where they can actually do field research. What's that research? On us. So I think the big thing to look out here is during the conference, there's a prize. Alexander Langmuir Prize is awarded to a current officer or first-year alumnus of the EIS for best scientific publication. The award consists of a $100 cash prize, engraved paperweight, blah, blah, blah. So there's an interesting number of articles here, some of the research they've done. Complications on smallpox vaccine, that's 1963. Outbreak of neural myasthenia in a Kentucky factory. Mercury poisoning, salmonellosis. From chicken, outbreak of tick-borne relapsing fever in Spokane County, Washington. Tularemia epidemic. So you can see.
We should talk about Washington again. There's a New Yorker article I want to bring up in a second.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, this is just risk of vastity. I mean, there's just the number. So it depends. I mean, it's like PhD. This looks like PhD research sort of projects, if you will. Like these would be the theses, if you will. Interesting. What I'm curious is this guy. Alexander Langmuir. So let's see. He died on November 22nd. This coincidence. That's another wink. 1993. Was an American epidemiologist. He is renowned for creating the EIS. Born in Santa Monica, Harvard, Cornell Medical College, Johns Hopkins, Johns Hopkins School of Hygiene and Public Health. Let's see. After serving as a public health officer in New York as an epidemiologist of the U.S. Army from 42 to 46, essentially the war years for the United States, World War II, Langmuir returned to Johns Hopkins to become associate professor of epidemiology in the School of Medicine. In 1949, he became director of the epidemiology branch of the National Communicable Disease Center, which then morphed into the CDC. In Atlanta, a position he held for over 20 years. He wrote extensively on all phases of epidemiology on a global basis and was recognized internationally as a leading contributor to epidemiology. Langmuir was a visiting professor. So obviously there's not much here, but it'd be interesting to do a deeper dive, brief biographical sketch with this emphasis on professional activities. I'll have to check out some of the research here. This is from Oxford Academic. It's available as a PDF, but I'll have to read. Anyways, that's really the getting into the general grammar of who this individual was, his connections, his training, his education, his experience with, what did they call it? The National Communicable Disease Center. So it's NCDC, but then became just the CDC. So there's, I'll have to do some more research into that, but in him setting up, I'm curious because I bet if one goes through this enough, you're going to find some unfortunate players, as Senna found in regards to Foege with the Carter Foundation, then being set up for that task, the Global Task Force, which is still extant to Senna's point, where there's major backers such as the Rockefeller Foundation, the World Bank, and a number of other, you can fill it in, I forget the other individuals, but a number of, the same sort of individuals that are funding a lot of the other institutions that are essentially doing nothing more than taking away more and more of individual rights and gaslighting the public with emergencies that don't really exist. Very interesting. So with that, what were you going to say, LD, about Washington?
Yeah, let's see. Oh, come on. Hello. There.
Yeah,
you're responding. Yes, this New Yorker article, just the other thing I want to throw in, because we were talking about Washington, University of Washington. Let's see. This is just New Yorker from April 26, 2020. Seattle's leaders let scientists take the lead. New York's did not. And it just goes into, it mentions the EIS and kind of outlines how their approach in that area, was it the Evergreen? They called it Evergreen Health. But you remember that was where the first nursing home. There was that one nursing home.
Yeah.
It was kind of ground zero.
Ground zero in the U.S.
In the U.S. Not to mention the outbreak, that movie, that whole plot, like the woman's an EIS agent, and so something to consider. I don't know. I might be getting off the rails. They treat it
like it's an enforcement agency. I mean, that's the fact that these people, and on one level, of course, they're going to be, as they have been, as alluded to from like the Wikipedia articles, at these sites of outbreaks, right? But the fact that they're always there at the key sites, it's 6 degrees of separation, but they can almost always expect it. The question is, what are sort of the connections for the reason why they would be there on? So I guess that's part of the field research of epidemiology. It's just weird. They treat it like it's a task force, like it's no, it's beyond task force. Like it's like an enforcement agency. Part of it, according to, if we go back, where was it? Too many EIS. It says here, enforcement of interstate quarantine regulations. So now this was the charter in 1951. Has it expanded? Like I'm on the CDC's website in regards to EIS FAQ. What did they learn? I'm trying to find. It's going to take time, but each year, approximately 30% of EIS officers are assigned to state, local, or territorial health departments or other partner organizations or agencies. The EIS officers are referred to as field assignees. Like their counterparts assigned to CDC, EIS field assignees participate in and lead epidemiologic investigations, conduct surveillance studies, interact with the public and the media, and produce high-quality scientific presentations of publications. It's almost like, if you will, sending in the researchers that probably already have a prescription for the narrative they need, for what they need to find, and making sure they're the ones doing the field research to come out with the conclusions that are already preordained by the CDC, or if it's not by the CDC, it's by the private pharmaceutical companies that are supporting certain narratives, including national governments that are supporting certain narratives. And they're the ones that go and do the field research, present it very scientifically, and move on from there. Field assignees are jointly supervised, mentored by experienced epidemiologists, partner with the agency, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, this is just like, join us sort of stuff, but I'll have to go through, I'll have to check this footprint on the world. Look, it's right over America. See, that's maybe the targeting first. I guess people can't see that, but LD, go ahead. Let's just play this promo real quick, then we'll come back to wrap up the discussion. But I'm going to put this in production chat. Just scroll down a little bit. You'll find it. It's just the EIS transforming careers and making a difference globally. Let's see what their little promo video has to say about this. My God, they have like a boot of a hiker when I put it in that's the thumbnail. You see that thumbnail? It's the foot's everywhere, man. I can't. Footprints everywhere.
This is the last thing
it's at the very bottom. Yeah, very bottom.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Let me put my camera back on.
Here.
If I had to describe EIS in one word, I would say it's life-changing.
If I had to pick one word to describe EIS, it would definitely be exhilarating.
I think if I were to describe the EIS program in one word, I would call it rewarding.
One word that I would say to describe EIS is ingenuity. And the reason I say that is because we live in a world where there are so many problems that are emerging rapidly. I have a twin sister, and we went to medical school together. We both did internal medicine training, and she is more clinically oriented. She went on to be a heart doctor. She's a cardiologist. And she said to me, you know, Vic, I think what I do is great, but what you do is really, really cool because you get to impact so many more people than I do on a daily basis. She said, I see a lot of sick patients. It tugs at my heartstrings because they're so sick and so ill. And I'm only helping that one person, and there are millions of other people that need my help. But you sit on the other side, on every day, you're looking at how do you prevent illness in so many more people.
So you can see the little propaganda video there. Interesting. I mean, it's a little promo video to join their organization. Get new aspiring epidemiologists coming out of medical school. What he said there, though, the impact on multiple people, like many people. So we're talking about a macro solution. That says it all. That's what this organization fundamentally is. That's where Bill Foege got his start, and with supposedly eradicating a disease that now isn't all over the news, mainstream news, but in regards to monkeypox, which our government just purchased millions of doses of the smallpox vaccine for. Very strange. More research to be done. So, Senna, is there anything else you want to mention? Anything we missed, maybe in regards to Bill Foege or his connections and why this is sort of a strange yet very important individual? He's more like a William Yandell Elliott or like a Herman Kahn behind Bill Gates, but on the epidemiology side instead of the geopolitical side.
He's a very strange character. I'm so sorry that I ever ran into him. I mean, I wasn't expecting all.
You know, when we were talking, you mentioned something to me, like, because there was something else I want to talk about real quick before I let you go. Let me see if I can find it here. Here. You sent something to me where I think it was Bill Foege, and I'm just going back and searching through our PMs together, had mentioned that he was concerned about a pox outbreak of some type. Like, this was him a year or two ago mentioning it. And then we have this Ted Turner sponsored, I forget the name of it, but this whole new simulation that happened, I think in 2020 or 2021. And then all of a sudden we have this mention of monkeypox. And it doesn't seem like it's going to become anything, but the timeline is just so eerie between the simulation and the emergence of even hearing about this. I'm trying to find it, but let me see if I can.
Bill Gates warns of smallpox terror attacks as he seeks more research funds. This is again from the Independent, November 4th, 2021.
Okay.
Could that be it?
That's definitely part of it.
Or is it too late in the timeline?
So this is what you quoted. So this goes back to, this is what you told me in November 18th, 2021. So you said, so check this out. I've been digging around the smallpox Bill Gates thing, which I'm sure is all over the media right now, or at least I hope. There's a doctor named William Foege. He's credited with eradicating smallpox. Turns out he's been Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation senior medical advisor since '99, which is its inception, as you pointed out earlier. He's also director of CDC. He's a board member and medical advisor to Theranos, which is the discredited company now. But let me see here. That's when you sent me. Oh, yeah. Then we got into the weird smallpox vials that we were found out. I didn't know about the 2001, but then there's the 20 that happened in December 2021, if I remember correctly. The weird situation in northeastern Pennsylvania highway, where the woman was spat on by a monkey.
And now that woman's dead.
Now she's dead.
Apparently, she did not die.
Oh no, good.
Yeah, I need to check into that. That James Evan Pilata brought that up.
Okay. Yeah, that's.
I'd rather she's not. I'd rather she's not dead.
Yeah, me too. I was a little disconcerting when I heard that. Oh, she had passed away.
So when I was texting you those, that was because I read that Independent article that I just read the title of, and Bill Gates is saying here. Bill Gates has warned governments to prepare for smallpox terror attacks and future pandemics by investing billions into research and development. This is dated November 4th, 2021. And then,
interesting, because you sent this to me November 18th. Here's another thing you sent.
That's when I was reading.
Oh, okay. Because, you're saying he's essentially, Bill Gates has been talking about smallpox survival since 2010.
Correct. If you look at YouTube, I didn't have the time to put all that together, but if you look at YouTube, there are still videos of Bill Gates giving TED Talk type 10, 15 minute speeches about pox, pandemics, and how it's going to be a bioterror attack. And then he talks about germ games. Didn't he write a book that says all kinds of things about germ games recently? So here's something he says. It'll take probably about $1 billion a year for a pandemic task force at the WHO level, which is doing the surveillance and actually doing what I call germ games, where you practice.
You notice what's happened there. We're connecting the dots. Like, so with the EIS, they're already
germ games.
But that's on a national scale. Now he's taking that same model and he's superimposing it on an international scale through the WHO. Now, how to prevent the next pandemic. I think that's the name of his new book. I think he talks about sort of this need for this global task force. Essentially, it's seemingly somewhat modeled off of an EIS style organization. That is a pandemic task force that can do what essentially they wanted to do through the treaty, which got shot down, and through the amendments specifically from the Biden administration the amendments to the resolutions, I should say, that the Biden administration put in that were specifically shot down. Nonetheless,
I sent you an LD link, and just like a couple minutes ago, it says you'll see it. It's pink.
Oh yeah.
Can you put that up because that's from 2015.
So let's see here. A beautiful wallpaper made with smallpox vaccine. It's made from liver cells that have been treated with a smallpox vaccine. So that's what they consider beautiful, these people.
But now read the first paragraph. You don't have to read any further, just the first.
The print, which looks like an oversized floral wallpaper. Weird. Using my ad blocker. Stop this stuff. Sorry. Anyways, the print, which looks like an oversized floral wallpaper, is actually made from liver cells that have been treated. This is going to drive me nuts. Pause. Sorry. The print, which looks like an oversized floral wallpaper, is actually made from liver cells that have been treated with a smallpox vaccine. Here we go. We're in the midst of an outbreak of debate, people arguing the merits of vaccinations. Its symptoms include feverish rhetoric and noxious op-eds. In an attempt to stem the spread of unhealthy attitudes towards science and misinformation about vaccines, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation sponsored the creation of 38 works of art by the likes of Annie Leibovitz, Mia Farrow, and Christoph Niemann to educate people about the power of these drugs.
This is in 2015. Exactly. What does it have to do with anything?
This is a massive non sequitur. This is non sequitur. When you commit a non sequitur fallacy, you're really not trying. One of the works.
So he has been talking about smallpox since 2010, nonstop.
Yeah.
There is this quote I read at some point in a newspaper, something about calling these people like magicians, but wordsmith magicians, not like woo-woo magic. And they just know how we operate, like the human consciousness.
Yeah.
So he's literally creating his own reality through our energy, because we're paying a lot of energy to it right now.
Yes.
And so I want to come back to something off, but on topic. Remember, you and Rich talk about it quite a bit. The Good Club.
Oh yeah.
From 2001, I think. What year is that? So what's happening in the Good Club? It's Gates.
Oh yeah, it'd be 2001. It was discovered because of I think it's some worker, who was it? It was a cleaning lady, something like that, discovered that all these people were meeting in this sort of clandestine fashion, some hotel.
But then they had superhero things come out, in the news and whatever. Absurd. It was really, it was very cringy. So the Good Club is Warren Buffett, Ted Turner, Bill Gates, Oprah, and whomever else.
There's David Rockefeller's on there as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Soros, George Soros.
Yeah, they did these promos on TV through their PR firms. It was really cringy to watch it. Oh, we're such nice guys. And then right around the same time, we saw this rise in all these puff pieces in newspapers and Newsweek and the New Yorker, etc., talking about, oh, Warren Buffett, he's such a down to earth man. He still lives in the same house he bought in 1950, whatever. Oh my God, Bill Gates is so amazing. He's so down to earth. He's so frugal that he only has one car. It's as if we don't know that these people don't own anything on their names, that everything is owned by their corporations. Like, are you joking? So, for instance, Bill Gates, there's nothing on that man's name. Maybe there's one car under his name because it was left there accidentally. He owns this thing called this investment firm. He wholly owns it. It's called Cascade, right? And Cascade Investments was run from a tiny office someplace in the middle of nowhere. I'm going to say Montana or something. And it became this enormous behemoth that runs his entire fund. And this is separate from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Oh, yeah. No, right. This is probably holding a lot of his assets, personal assets. That's what it's doing, right?
And it's separate from Melinda. So he had to buy her out of it. But through that, he owns 30% of the world's largest private aircraft leasing and support company. It's called Signature Aviation. Okay. His partners are the Blackstone Group, which is Steven Schwartzman. And the other partner who owns 35% is this company that is run by this Nigerian billionaire who, let me think. The company is called GIF. Okay. It is the owner and operator of the London Gatwick Airport and the London City Airport. So back in November or whenever it was, they had COP26 in Glasgow, and it was a huge debacle about 400 private jets that could not be accommodated in Glasgow because their airport is tiny. And now you have 400 private jets. Forget all the commercial aircraft that was landing, 400 plus private jets that were stranded. They had no place to park or refuel. So guess what? GIF, and because GIF owns London City Airport and Gatwick, all of them were diverted to London City Airport and Gatwick. And these people sat in Glasgow and talked about carbon footprint and what you should eat and how you should eat your crickets and all this nonsense while this is going on. That's why when people are saying, oh, Bill Gates doesn't even own a plane. Yeah, he doesn't own a plane. He owns 2,000 of them.
The same thing when he's buying up acreage around, you talked about Turkey earlier. It's obviously the big news is how much acreage that he's been buying up in America. Becoming one of the principal investors. He himself isn't owning that. It's one of his investment firms. Many of what might be, it could be under his children's name. It could be under, he could even own the investment firm, but the investment firm is an artificial body created that then owns it. But he just happens to be the principal shareholder. And obviously they're not public companies, so he would probably have 100% ownership, or maybe he shares it with a couple of friends of his, but he'd still have the majority ownership. This is how corporations work to hide and mask
half
these.
of Ritz-Carlton hotels. Half of Ritz-Carlton. He owns 15% of Canadian National Railway. It's like a joke.
Yeah. Well, the Good Club is a big joke. When they met in New York they had a secret New York meeting, right? I think I forget the hotel name. And they were sort of outed by just the weirdest of circumstances. They were meeting to discuss philanthropy. Like to everything you're alluding to in regards to eating bugs, to the climate agenda and the carbon footprint, to global disease. This is what these individuals basically were meeting to talk about. What happened was they spun it, to your point. Started saying like, look, these are good people. They sort of tongue in cheek, they named themselves the Good Club. They're chronicling like their essence of philanthropy. It's obnoxious. Like they sort of spun it like, look, these are people doing the best they can to address global issues. And they had to meet in secret because it would become a big issue. And then people would look at them and say, draw conspiracy theorists or other individuals would, claim that there's up to nefarious, dealings, when in fact, no, they're just, people who have a lot of money, a lot of power that just want to do the best they can for the world and acknowledging global problems. It's just such a nonsensical, and they did this, this had to have been early 2000s. It's absurd. It's just like health crisis, environmental crisis. Those are the two big things, if I remember correctly. Health crisis, and which, by the way, didn't really exist. Like, yes, under Obama. Let me see if I can find when they started this. We have like what? We had the avian flu outbreak. That was a big thing, I think, around the time that he was being elected. Well, there weren't.
Swine flu too.
Swine flu. That's another one.
April 25th, 2009, the World Health Organization, headed by Margaret Chan, declared a public emergency of international concern. A few weeks later, the Good Club met in New York City at the height of the H1N1 swine flu pandemic, which turned out to be a scam. This is wikispooks.com, but that also mentioned Neil Ferguson.
When they started, but it was in there. It was 2009.
That's what it looks like, but let me check.
Yeah, I thought it was around the time. What's his name? Obama came into office.
Yeah, there's a Guardian article, May 30th, 2009. They're called the Good Club, and they want to save the world.
There you go. They're superheroes. Yeah, billionaires to shrink world. This is my favorite.
Oh.
Wall Street Journal. Billionaires to shrink the world's population, report said. Last week's meeting of the great and the good. This would have been May, around, so we're talking about what, 13 years ago, something like that. Last week's meeting of the great and the good, or the richest and the richer, was bound to draw criticism, Associated Press. New York meeting of billionaires, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, David Rockefeller, Eli Broad, George Soros, Ted Turner, Oprah, Michael Bloomberg, and others, was described by the Chronicle of Philanthropy as an informal gathering aimed at encouraging philanthropy. Just a few billionaires getting together for drinks and dinner and a friendly chat about. That's why they had to be so secretive. So they had to host it in some conference room, and I think it was some famous hotel, but like with no one around, and it was like in weird hours. It was very strange. There's no agenda. Going back to the article now, we were told, and no plan for follow-up meeting. But in the age of fallen wealth idols, it was inevitable that a meeting of billionaire minds would draw scrutiny. An article in the Times of London headlined "Billionaire Club in bid to curb world population," said the issues discussed in the top secret meeting included healthcare, education, by far the most controversial, slowing the global population growth. Quote, taking their cue from Gates, they agreed that overpopulation was the priority, the article said, adding that, to continue the quote, this could result in a challenge to some third world politicians who believe contraceptive and female education weaken traditional values, end quote. Such a stand wouldn't be surprising. like Mrs. I guess is former Mrs. Gates, Buffett, or the Mrs.'s, excuse me. So Melinda Gates, Warren Buffett's wife, and who's Ted Turner's wife? I forget. Anyways, have been quietly worrying about Malthusian population problems for years. Mr. Gates in February outlined a plan to try to cap the world's population at 8.3 billion people, rather than the projected 9.3 billion at which the population is expected to peak. But some right-leaning blogs have started to attack the poor billionaires as forming a kind of secret sterilization society or giant ATM to fund abortions. It fed into oh man, the question begging epithets. It fed into time-honored fears of the rich using their wealth to reshape mankind in its preferred image. Some are raising the specter of eugenics. I'm not taking a stand on population control, but from what I personally told about the meeting and what the Times spells out further down in the story, Times spells out, population control is just one of the many items raised during the meeting, such as philanthropists talk about what they were trying to work on. It wasn't the reasoning for meeting, and there was no real plans for follow-up confab. So he doesn't address that was one of the key articles. He doesn't, in fact, what he's saying here is, yeah, it seems like that was something they talked about, but let's not pay too much attention to it. Let's not give it too much credence. Let's take a step back. Let's chill out. Yeah, they're going to get together and talk about world population, problems, but that's just being exacerbated and overblown. So this is a whole thing. Now, Rich has already done a deep dive, and we've talked about this ad nauseum. We know who Ted Turner is. We don't mean to bring up his history in regards to his views on population. Bill Gates, both him and Bill Gates have been the most conspicuous, by the way, and talked about the need to curb population. I think Turner is probably even more conspicuous, more obvious, I should say, than even Bill Gates. And he came out in like 96, was it Charlie Rose or something like that, where he's sitting there saying, too many people. That's the problem. There's too many people, And so he really pushing this idea forward that we need to do something about population. Now, obviously, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, before we get to the foundation, Bill Gates taking the lead from his father, who obviously was intertwined with these individuals who, what's the word I'm looking for, but networked with these individuals quite heavily, David Rockefeller, Turner, George Soros, so forth and so on. We know about his influence on Planned Parenthood, his views on eugenics, going back over 10 years. I mean, I remember doing exposés. In fact, shout out to, who was it? Aaron Dykes. Before they became True Stream Media, and he found, he met his wife. He worked for InfoWars. He did it wasn't a nightly news segment back then, but it was sort of his own segment he did in the evenings, where he got to do deep dives into historical elements. And he did a deep dive into the history of eugenics, Bill Gates, and Bill Gates' father, which is very interesting. Worth checking out. That's like over 10 years old now. And that's where Rich and I both noticed that Aaron is an incredible researcher and deserves a lot more sort of credit than or spotlight than he was getting at the time. And of course, what happened after that. I won't go into detail because I have respect both for Alex and for Aaron, even if they had some issues. Nonetheless, there's that. George Soros. Do we need to mention anything more about George Soros? Remember the greatest time of his life, what that was during the war. His greatest memory. I can't find that clip anymore, but he had some great memories back during during World War II, apparently, according to him. His Open Society foundations, his connections with actually funding the Maidan coup. What's that fist called, Senna? Was that that famous fist of freedom?
Oh, it's the OTPOR, OTPOR.
Yes.
That's the organization. And I forget the name of the fist, but
it stands for like that. Yeah. But the OTPOR thing, that was funded through his organization, or he was one of the key funders.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, because OTPOR operated under Open Society, and this is not like hidden knowledge.
It's on his website.
Open Society. It's on the website. How they developed OTPOR and how they created all the coups and color revolutions. They are proud of their color revolutions. That's what they do, and they're very proud of it.
It reminds me of Solowinski a little bit, like the rules for radicals going back to like the 1960s. And when you think about like the idea of being able to infiltrate ideological movements that are sort of fomenting in the youth, and then use that to create. But this is different though. So like what Solowinski was alluding to was something more, it's different but similar. Like the difference is information technology, because the difference now is a lot of it was like, even within the youth, it didn't seem like there were these massive if you get on the ground, it's not like, if we're talking about a small contingency of ideologically possessed individuals that gave way and gave into this, where you get this weird footage from cell phone cameras on site, making it seem like there's this huge uprising when there isn't. Then there's this Facebook posting, and then there's maybe, I don't know if IG existed at the time or Twitter, but all of a sudden there's this cascade effect from whatever social media exists, and it makes it seem like it's like Coney 2012. It makes it seem like it's so much bigger than it actually was, and it's enough just through narrative to topple regimes, which is sort of what happened. Not to say there weren't issues, there were actual manifestations of violence. There absolutely were, but it wasn't. It was much more contrived by the feedback loop of technology, and that was the cybernetic vision. Gone back to the Macy conferences and before, as far as like with the impact on these machine mediated interfaces. I'm just sorry, I just pieced that together in my mind right now. I was thinking about that because it's like Solowinski, but Solowinski didn't have the technology of social media, and this is long before the internet existed. So his rules for radicals is a model, but they're able to take that and just provide fake narratives that look at what happened in Egypt, or Syria. Well, Yemen was a whole different. Jesus Christ.
It was the Arab Spring. Yeah, they did the entire Arab Spring right after they did. Open Society was in New York right after the 2008 collapse.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
At Zuccotti Park, they were having these. You know, I know some people who actually went there because they actually believed in it.
Okay.
And the Occupy Wall Street thing.
Oh yeah.
However, when you look at it, all of a sudden, as soon as you see something that says, and this is happening before Facebook really blew up like this, Twitter wasn't really this active, and there was no Instagram or anything like that.
Right.
All of a sudden, you're hearing in the neighborhood, oh, these people are gathering at Occupy Wall Street.
That's what I'm alluding to. Yes.
I was working right around the corner, so I had to like constantly move my car from that area. And Wall Street is very difficult to park in. So anyway, these people are constantly gathering there and blocking the street, which is fine, all good. But they all have the same exact cardboard or signs. They're all wearing the same T-shirts. Now, I know how long it takes to produce those things.
Right.
You can't just say we're gathering here and then all of a sudden show up with 500 T-shirts for everyone. Who's funding this? You know what I mean? It's not organic at that point. And of course, everyone's like, oh, give me one T-shirt, give me one T-shirt. And everyone's sitting there with their T-shirts on. And then this kept happening. They did this in the Arab Spring in 2011, I think, in Egypt. They did it in Syria. They did it in Turkey in 2013. All of a sudden, all these people are gathering together after a cause that was just created like that, out of thin air. That cause didn't exist. All of a sudden, it just exists. Same thing, 2014, the Maidan thing. It happened the exact same way how it happened in Istanbul at Gezi Park the previous June. Fascinating. Same font, same kind of cardboard signs. It's amazing. And Open Society is behind all of it. When you say it though, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Yeah, okay, I am that. I'm not doing the conspiracy though. I'm just seeing things. You know what I mean?
Well, that was what I was alluding to though. It's like even if there was a sense, I mean, this goes back to Rich and I have commented on this in regards to Mazzini and the British State Department in the 19th century and Lord Palmerston.
The Young movement.
The Young's movements. So like they know about fomenting the ideological passions of the youth. But the thing is, what I'm saying here is it's even more artificial than that, because there was that national sentiment that was sweeping across parts of Europe and especially in Central and South America, then later on in Asia, that were, you can't say authentic, but the youth really, were galvanized by this sense of nationalistic pride, of wanting pride in their own, where they live, where they're from, wanting more control, and almost like the Illuminati infiltrating Freemasonic lodge. The same thing as a bourgeoisie that wanted to have more say over the kingships in which they had control over industries and over other areas. So it's like a middle class or upper middle class of like oligarchs, if you will, that want more say and power in legislation. Now you have this fomentation in the 19th century, the young movements, weaponizing ideological passions. Same thing happened in the 60s. Saul Lewinsky had to get rules radical. But then when you get these and that was, the color revolutions have taken place at different times. So we're using that term loosely because I know it refers to an earlier time, but the same thing in the 2010s. You have the color revolutions. The difference is there wasn't seemingly a strong ideological passion from necessarily these young individuals. Yeah, they knew the world's fucked up, and it was more like undirected frustration. This like sort of sitting there. What's the term Matthias Desmet uses? But this like it's sort of ungrounded anxiety. It's not focused on something, just like free floating. That's it, free floating anxiety. And so there's all this free floating anxiety. And now you give them a sense of like, well, we know, and again, notice when it happens after the 2008 subprime crash. It's also a year later. That's when the Good Club meets. Not even a year later. We're talking like 6 months later. That's when the Good Club is meeting, when there's like the fallout of the subprime mortgage situation, which is absurd. Try to get a mathematician to derive derivative derivative lending. Because they can't, because the whole thing is absurd to begin with. I won't go down that rabbit hole. Point is, it was more contrived, more narrative driven than those other ones in the past. Same style, but now we have information technology. To your point, there's an organization through the open system. They use different names. So it's through the Open Society Foundations that are George Soros that have the T-shirts printed, have like the pamphlets, have the whatever paraphernalia ready to go. And then all of a sudden, if you're just some wayward youth just chilling one day on the street, don't have anything to do, you get sort of sucked up into this sort of zeitgeist of this movement. The next thing you know, it's like a huge thing. And I call it the negative effects of the bystander, or negative consequences of the bystander effect. Where as much as the bystander effect can be used positively, if you're an individual of one that is willing to go against the grain, and you can just over time get enough people to come along and support your cause just by being an individual and by being willing to put yourself out there. You can do that same thing, but in a negative sense that can control and tear down. It's like all it takes, tear down institutions or situations that have nothing to do with nefarious activity. It's very clever in regards to what very evil, but very clever. Because from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, a lot, even in Egypt, for example, even in Ukraine, or it wasn't Ukraine, it was somewhere in Eastern Europe in like 2004, 2005, there were a number of them. These situations didn't just, it's seemingly like it wasn't a majority. We're talking about a small minority that then the media presents as though it's a mass uprising. That's the thing. And then especially later on with what's happened in like Syria, for example, in Egypt, I think we did have, because those were like 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. So people had picture phones and camera phones. And so it makes it look like there's this organic emergence of a revolution taking place, when in fact it's all being controlled from the background through narrative control and being propagated as though, as we know, when we interact with social media, we tend to take a picture or a video someone posts and think that's the entire story of someone's life. That's what creates the depression. It's this disconnect between reality and the way they're presenting themselves. So what creates cognitive dissonance. I don't know. It's just it's a very evil but very clever way to manipulate. Again, this is the sort of asymmetrical warfare going on. Manipulate people's consciousness to make people believe there's something bigger happening than in fact of what it was, being already controlled through foundations that have already set up the paraphernalia and the propaganda machine in order to make it seem like that's the key here. Seem like this is organic, grassroots, from the ground up, just like the young movements. The young movements were made from the British State Department. It was made to seem organic. And what Lord Palmerston did through his agents like Mazzini and others were to infiltrate these young movements and make them seem like that they were organic, reasonable revolutions for nation states to manifest themselves without realizing that behind the scenes, much like Sykes-Picot Agreement during World War I, it really helps benefit the British Empire. Like it helps to benefit with the infrastructure and the institutions that already exist, at least that want to foment these types of revolutions. Just same strategy, but different levels of technology be able to create that narrative control. So very, very scary. But when we saw that, obviously, and maybe its most conspicuous form with COVID-19 and the way they were able to control it, but that became so overbearing that there was a little bit of pushback. Whew. So with that, any last comments, questions before we wrap up tonight's fantastic conversation, by the way? How late is it?
Yes, I do.
Wow, it's 12:40.
In order to save yourself from monkeypox, I highly recommend, and this is my very well studied medical opinion. It's called MDB, mask distance banana. So just go with that.
Mass distance banana.
MDB. That's my very medical opinion.
I thought you were gonna.
I went to the same medical school with Bill Gates.
So I thought you were gonna say that's one of the new genders that exists.
No, this is just for monkeypox.
Just for monkeypox. Is monkeypox a type of gender though? Maybe we can conflate the two.
I don't know. It's just.
I mean, banana. It could be taken anyways. That's I'm gonna try that. So I just have to distance myself from bananas.
How
or
many
anything
bananas?
that's considered to be a banana.
You have to just test it your own way.
Okay, that's good.
But that's
Since
my
we create
medical
our own
opinion.
realities according to
it's my medical
subjectivism.
opinion. Yeah, I'm giving medical opinion to everyone.
Well, it's not as bad. Yeah, you have just as much qualification.
Yeah, I went to the same school, same medical school as Bill Gates.
Luckily, everyone in the world went to the same medical school.
Exactly. We all did.
Oh, shit.
I mean, too much Bill Gates for one night, really.
Yeah.
Enough.
Fantastic conversation. Thank you again so much for
Absolutely.
making us aware.
Anytime.
Because the one thing I can say for sure is when you presented this to me a couple of weeks ago, and obviously I've been in the middle of a move, getting more settled now, but I just didn't have the time to dive into this. I'm like, wouldn't it be great if I could just get her on, get Senna on, have her present? So super appreciate you spending time researching this and making people aware. I think he's like a Herman Kahn or William Endell Elliott of but on the epidemiological side, where he's like sort of the brains behind. He's the advisors. He's the guy behind the Karl Rove behind President Bush, sort of thing. You know what I'm saying? Like it's one of these, or Brzezinski or Ford behind, Kissinger behind Nixon. You know, it's like these individuals that are really they sit in the background, but they're the ones who come up with the strategies, the methodologies, the legislation that later becomes legislation or practices that are put in place. So it's really important to be aware of of these background individuals because they're the ones
always looming, and that's the problem.
Yes.
He's still around. He's still looming over all of these things. He still works for the Carter Center.
Yes.
He still runs the task force, and he still advises Bill Gates. It's enormous power.
Yes.
It's very Machiavelli-like. So,
well, you said the fact he still runs the task force and is the key advisor to Bill and Melinda Gates, I guess, is he still probably still part of the board since its inception, unless he stepped down? If
you look at Gates' notes, that's Bill Gates' supposedly own blog.
Yep.
There, Bill Gates has a hagiography for his own father and Bill Foege. Interesting.
Now, hagiography, just so people who may not be aware, how would you define that? Well, in ancient Greek and modern Greek, Aya, you write it as Hagia and you read it as Aya. It means saint. So you make a saint out of someone by writing, a story about them or how you met them and how they influenced you, and that's a hagiography. Yes, they're basically pseudo-biographical dissertations that manifest themselves usually decades, if not centuries, after the person lives, in a way to prop them up or apotheosize the individual to make them seem like they've done something more than what they have. So,
but
very
always
well
and
said.
always making them into something a lot bigger than they are,
Yes.
almost like creating Alexander the Great out of them, because
Yes. It's a deity complex.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Godlike, saint-like.
It's associated with saints. It's associated with saint.
That's why it's hagiography. Yeah.
Right.
A lot of popes have saint status.
Yes. Well, a lot of saints in history we can never trace back that have ever existed. There's a lot. I mean, the same could be said of Christ and Buddha, Gautama, Siddhartha Gautama, all these individuals but there's like these incredible hagiographies about their existence and what they did and the miracles and all these situations. And, take a step back and realize these are written by people decades, if not centuries afterwards, that are propping them up to support a certain narrative that helps ground the culture in a hero sort of worship. So much like Alexander the Great that went on for like 1,000 years. So that's a whole.
And you could
talk endlessly for that.
Yes.
I was just watching something when okay, we'll talk on the background. I was just watching this whole history in Alexander the Great. Some of the shit. Oh, we gotta talk on the background. It's
Alexander
so
the
absurd.
Great is an actual man. Yes, he existed.
He existed. I'm not denying that.
Absolutely. However, what came out of Alexander the Great is something beyond a person.
Yes.
So he definitely, although he wasn't Hellene, as in he was not a Greek.
He's Macedonian.
He's a Macedonian.
Greek. Yeah.
Correct. And he did speak Greek because that was the lingua franca of the time.
And they also conquered all of Greece.
Yes. Lingua franca is like how wherever you go in the world right now, English is accepted and spoken, even in small amounts. That's what a lingua franca is, the language of the day, which lacks literary nuance, but you can get, like the way I speak French or Italian, like I can order food, but I can't have a literary discussion with you or go into depth with you.
Yeah.
So anyway, so he Hellenizes the world, opening all the way to India, all the way to Anatolia, and all the way to Alexandria, Egypt. And the way he Hellenized the entire region, he brought so much Hellenic culture to all those regions that there was a worship of him by the people that lived there. And that went on over centuries, where there's an entire literary style called Iskandername, which is Alexander worship, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have the books here, but there are hundreds of books written about it, all the way from the 6th century onwards. And this
lasted for centuries, where they actually considered this is why I'm unsympathetic to, like, I believe the narratives have important archetypes in them that should be acknowledged, but to assign historicity to the narratives totally, such as whether we're talking about Christ, or we're talking about Buddha, or we're talking about someone like Alexander the Great. And I'm picking on those other two because a lot of individuals say it's impossible for movements to start up unless a historical figure didn't exist. Well, maybe he did, but the qualities ascribed to him that defy cause and effect, defy the law of identity. And so we have to take a step back from the mythology, from the reality, whether these individuals existed in the way that was presented and believed upon in modern day, because we tend to build them up based on hagiographies and things of that
Alexander nature. That's deified did not exist.
Right.
He flew to the sun on the back of four eagles. Nobody does that.
Right. It's the same with
I don't have to say it.
The same with the miracles of Christ or the miracles of Buddha, for example. So there's the number when he sits under the Bodhi tree, and all the animals come and surround him, and the earth shakes and quivers at his tremendous power. And it's like you hear these stories, and you're like, we can take a step back from the mythology a little bit, And
or when the same exact thing happens to Mithra 300 years before either one of those personalities existed, so
right.
deifying these people is, it's just creating a different genre of worship.
Yes, exactly. And so you can see we're not immune to that today. It's not as though we've evolved to be different from what we were anatomically thousands of years ago. Human beings haven't evolved again for over 250,000, 500,000 years. We've been anatomically, at least conservatively, the same for hundreds of thousands of years. So it's not like we've all of a sudden evolved to a point where we're immune to this. So we have to be very careful about what we believe about our past in regards to the mythology, the art, and the qualities that are ascribed to certain figures in history. That will also remain true of what they say about this period in history, what's happening with COVID, the individuals that were responsible. You can even see it with the worship in some circles and on the left, if you will, whatever. I know it's a sort of loose term, but people who worship Fauci. Look at the hero worship around Fauci. What will be written about him afterwards? Obviously, there's enough counter narrative to him now, which I think. But so there was at the time of Christ with Gnostic literature too. So who knows what will emerge as being the literature that's accepted in history later on. So it's a difficult situation.
Christ was not worshipped when he was alive, or 100 years after his death either.
Well, that's because you can't build.
People did. But the whole, the entire Christ consciousness happened in the Christian world hundreds of years later.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you can't design a church under the Gospels. They're too analogical. They're too archetypal. They're too metaphorical or allegorical. It takes the Pauline doctrine, so the letters of Paul, in order to design a church that then becomes instantiated as becoming the main hegemon, if you will, the Caesars, the Flavian dynasty, which then uses it as a form of state control. After the patristic era, control,
and the state control will be solidified much later in the mid 300s with the Council of Nicaea.
Right. That's right.
And that's then it will become the state religion.
Yes.
Much, much later.
That's right.
So, he dies in year 33?
Mm-hmm.
And this happens 300 years later. And even then, they could never shake off the pagan worship.
No.
They couldn't. It never went away. It's still there. To this day, it's there.
Oh, yeah.
All of that region, it is not like the Western Catholicism, the Eastern lands where, Greece, the Balkans, Turkey, Egypt, those areas not believe, but
they're much more mystically inspired.
Yes.
It's very different. It reminds me much more of Plato or the Platonic doctrine or the Platonic philosophy that existed for 1,000 years than it does. What we got in the West was a very, very different version. And we're talking about Orthodox, but there's various branches of Orthodox, so I don't want to get confused by that term. But the East has preserved something very different, both in hierarchical structure too, because they don't recognize the papacy or the legitimacy of the Vatican. So it's a whole different, not to mention the key texts that came out of the Nag Hammadi library, and also then later on in Qumran, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Had a major impact, actually getting scrolls that were in Aramaic. That's unbelievable, and telling a very different type of worship that was existing at those times. So it's important because, Peterson always points this out, but so many others have sort of followed suit of the ideological penchant that individuals have, or proclivity we as individuals have. So we have to, nothing wrong with that. I think the religious instinct in us is a very valuable instinct. There are many questions about who we are, where we're going, where do we come from. That's always going to be perennial questions asked. But we have to be important not to use it as a way to othering other people, other beliefs, and forgetting the universals, our shared humanity with one another. Because oftentimes it's used too often to highlight the differences. And sort of... Because
religion is never about a God or what your inner belief is. Religion is falling in line with the group.
Yes.
That's what religious practice is. That's what a cult is. They're all the same thing, but they have different names and different sizes. Some of them have 1.5 billion followers. Some of them have 500 followers.
Correct.
Or, in Fauci's case, I don't know who's following him, but that's also a religion.
That's a religion. We call it scientism. That's right.
Yes, the scientism is a religion, and it has a deity of, and it's not one deity because it has all different things. There's the vaccine component. There's the Fauci component.
It's a polytheistic religion.
CNN component. So, you have the apostles, you have the God, you have the God's creation. I mean,
the disciples that follow the apostles, then follow the saints and the prophets, and ultimately the chosen one or ones. So you can see the same structure. So you have the epidemiologist sitting on top, task force that was created, Corona task force.
Even HOAs can turn into, you can turn an HOA into a religion.
That's,
Yeah, because, these are the rules, let's say they have a pool or a shared lake or something like that. Oh, you can't do these. It's written in the bylaws. Like, are you kidding me?
Hey, that goes back to, you're exactly right with HOA, but that goes back to the occult origins of language law that, rest in peace, that Jordan Maxwell would allude to. And not to give, I know he's a little out there, and certainly is, but he would talk about the occult origins oftentimes of the law, how it relates to religious organization. And I reference sometimes The Babylonian Woes by David Astell. And he goes on to mention how money, creation of money, money supply, medium of exchange was related to the temples. So the places of worship. Now, why is this important? Well, if people remember the story of Christ going into and overturning the money changers, right? Causing all sorts of ruckus outside. It was inside sort of the courtyard of the temples, and saying, blaspheming my God by essentially giving into all this sort of materialism and idolatries and all this sort of nonsense in regards to what you're doing. That's a powerful statement in regards to the issue of the confluence between money, energy, power, and religion. There's like essentially an unholy alliance with those ideas, concepts intertwines. That goes also to what you're saying, Senna, with law, because law is like a religion in that regard, and the way in which
law has its own language.
Yes.
And if you're not in the practice of law, and if you don't speak that language, you will never win your case. So in order to appeal to the God of law, you need to bring your lawyer with you who can translate that language for you.
He acts as a sort of priest. He acts essentially as a priest that is allowed
isn't that crazy? What you're calling money changers, that's usury, which was illegal at the time. Nowadays, we all have credit cards, which is usury. So
well, the whole thing's built on
that is the new. That's a different religion.
Yes.
Right. I mean, these are all little religions. That it doesn't have to have a God that you put your head down on the carpet for. But
it's something we give belief to, which gives it its meaning and allows it to continue. The belief in the credit system of America allows the dollar to continue its dominance when we are already an insolvent nation, for example, or these sorts of elements where it's like it defies the causal laws of what's existing. Because
you pay your energy into it.
Yeah.
Literally. As in, literal energy. You work, right? Yeah. And then you take a piece of paper in the form of money or whatever, and then you put it towards that. Now you just I shouldn't say wasted, but you gave your energy to that thing. So we have to choose what.
It's a metaphor for energy. So there's an analogy with energy that can be used. David Astell points this out. Actually, I think he presents it more as a metaphor, but it's like the banks of I guess this would be more of an analogy, but like the banks of a river. So you can think technically money flows downstream, due to the laws of gravity. so forth and so on. But he repositioned this analogy to say they reversed the change, they reversed the flow where it now goes back upstream and it hits certain banks, which are certain areas where you have to, where the energy becomes consolidated, repurposed, and then pushed back up, almost like some sort of generator that pushes energy back up upstream instead of flowing downstream, defying the natural flow of how nature works. And so I have to find that quote. It's a really interesting one.
Bank is a Sumerian word that means flat surface, and that's where transactions took place. That's what banks are still named after, and so are river banks, which are flat surfaces. That's why
I don't know if he knew that, but I think that's why he related the idea of a riverbank with an actual bank sort of transmuting energy at certain places to be able to take that energy and push it back upstream, or take it wherever it needs to go. And it becomes, because movement or any form of change of one's position requires energy. So whenever we dedicate ourselves to the pursuit of labor in order to produce something and exchange that in value for someone else's labor, that's therefore we are using energy. So it's nothing more than a metaphor for energy production and manipulation and control, quite literally, in the individual and us who have to try to produce in order to participate in an economy that is built on sort of a bedrock of lies and usury. And the whole thing is built on credit. So the whole thing is built on fundamentally a fiat currency then is printed by a private central bank. So the whole thing, no matter what, you can never get ahead. You're always going to be in some case in debt to someone or something, paying some sort of interest to those bankers. Now, in history, this has been a major issue, because when this has ever been figured out, there have been wars fought over this. There have been jubilees where there's been debt forgiveness. No one knows about that. There have been a whole host of very strange situations where whenever there's an economic upturn, you can usually associate it with the medium of exchange itself. What money is, numismatics, I think is the technical term for the study of it, and how that relates to a culture's development. And Quigley even mentions this very subtly in the beginning of his book. So unfortunately,
there's an excellent book. There's an excellent book by David Graeber, who passed away last year. It's called Debt, the First 5,000 Years.
Ooh,
and I very highly recommend it. I think I have it here somewhere, but I don't know where right now. It's a fantastic book that tells the entire story of what money really is, what debt is, and how everything works in that sense. I don't agree with every page of it, but I highly recommend it, because there's a lot of, he's an anthropologist before everything else. So it is an actually very well studied book. It's not just mumbo jumbo. Sometimes, unfortunately, Jordan Maxwell, as wonderful as he was, there was a lot of mumbo jumbo in there.
He was all over the place. I mean, it reminds me a lot of Bill Cooper. We give homage to like Bill Cooper, Behold a Pale Horse, excuse me, and the Jordan Maxwell, but they were very loose in their associations and made it seem very much more esoteric and mystical than it needed to be. And they also got caught in rabbit holes, but we also have to pay them credit. This is before the internet, when they're just getting old encyclopedias or old documents and old books, first edition copies. So they're working in a different time frame than we are, or with different types of information technology available to them. But they also tended to present it in a very esoteric or abstract, way that didn't need to exist that way, and also made some connections that were not legitimate. But they did a good job for the tools they had available to. They also, I think it also came part of their character a little bit, or the caricature that was built up. Like they're the esotericists. Like you had beyond Jordan Maxwell. No, don't tell me I forget this guy's name. I think he was from Ireland or the UK. There's another one. Oh man, I used to be into his work. My brain's not working, but there's a number of individuals very similar to Maxwell that exist around that time. That also, I'll figure it out later. To piggyback on the book you just mentioned, Stephen Zarlinga, he has a series of ideological biases. You have to read through that, but he also did a good history called him the Hidden Science of Money or something. The
this
Lost
book.
Science of Money. Yeah. The
This-
American Monetary
yeah.
Institute he set up.
And
Go ahead.
if I may, anyone who has children that they would like to educate about money, I couldn't recommend this book enough. And also, please do not buy it from Amazon. Buy it from the American Monetary Institute. It comes with a lovely handwritten note in it. And it's the same exact price that you would pay on Amazon. They don't charge for shipping. Just buy it through the American Monetary Institute. They are lovely people.
Yeah, I have to also say, when I first met Rich, when I first heard about Rich, I probably discovered in some capacity 9/11. So, at first I discovered him through Gnostic Media at the time. But I remember one of the first podcasts I ever heard both him and Jan Irvin and Brett Venat. We mentioned the School Sucks Project tonight. Those three individuals.
That guy's name was Michael Tessarian. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. Michael Tessarian.
Were you thinking of Alan Watt?
It just hit me.
A little bit, but more Michael Tessarian.
Yeah.
Alan Watt was also too, but Alan Watt was like an early version of Jay Dyer, kind of, or what Jay Dyer became. That's separate. I mean, that's a loose association, but yeah, all of them. But Michael Tessarian is more related to the Jordan Maxwell was sort of the protege, or not protege. I'm sorry, was the archetype for then what Michael Tessarian and others, Alan Watt to some extent, became. But when I first heard Rich, so shout out to all those guys. But when I first heard, anyways, it was like one of the early episodes. It was on a Peace Revolution podcast very early on. They actually, Steven Zarlinga, to his credit, very, very nice man, very humble man. He went on. I mean, we're talking about this little podcast and had this debate. I mean, I'll never forget. Jan called him up randomly because Jan had interviewed him as part of his Gnostic Media podcast he was running at the time. One of the first episodes, I want to say, one of the first 50 or so episodes of the podcast, 25 or 50. So he had some sort of rapport with Steven Zarlinga at the time, and he called him on the spot while they were doing this roundtable. So it was Brett Venat, Jan Irvin, Richard Grove, and Paul Verge. And Steven Zarlinga actually popped on in the middle of a working day and actually was willing to have a discussion. So shout out to Steven Zarlinga. This is a really humble, very nice man, very intelligent man, but just down to earth and really loves to talk and explore ideas. And, they're discussing his book, discussing numismatics, discussing the concepts of money and how they've been employed at different time periods in history. And, he did I agree with Senna. The one thing about, even though it's a thick book, it's a very easy read. Like David Astel's book, The Babylonian Woes, very, very difficult read. Very interesting. It gets more into mythology and the importance of priesthood and temples and ancient pagan religious structures, so forth and so on. But Steven Zarlinga really focuses on bringing it to the core and the essence of what needs to be communicated. And it's something that's very much more presentable for children and young adolescents that are getting into studying more of history. It's be fantastic because you also will learn a lot of history as well, not just monetary history. So shout out. I agree, Senna, 100% on that.
There's an entire section on the Templars and their how they affected the gold ratio. Mm-hmm. It's very cool.
Making your mark. They were the first one that really made you make a mark, and they had a credit system because they would hold. This is actually, I remember when I first met Gino Denning, my mentor. I should share an email sometime if I can find it. I have it saved, where he went into all this history because he found it either through that or through other sources. Exactly what you're saying. The Templars were ostensibly set up a holy route to the Jerusalem, for European pilgrims. But truthfully, what they were doing is they were taking in gold deposits and then doing fractional reserve lending. And that's where you first get the sense of making your mark and having this like credit system of IOUs and whatnot. Now, this has been in practice before in ancient times, but they really manifested in the medieval world, remanifesting or bringing it back, rediscovering sort of a technology, if you will, and bringing it back into the medieval world, which is where you get the Friday the 13th mythos from what happened, because they got the church really in debt, if I remember correctly. And the church was not happy about that. So,
well, the Templars walked into Jerusalem, and the king of Jerusalem handed them the keys to the Temple Mount and his castle. So it's a very It's amazing. I mean, I would love to walk in someplace with 10 of my best friends and be like, all right, darling, give me the keys.
Yeah,
Like,
it's like walking in New York, you get the key to the city.
And
like all
and
the
then they start
institutions.
digging. And then they start digging and they dig for years under Temple Mount. Like, what happened there? I would love to be there now.
Right? Yeah, there's me too. There's a lot of very strange stuff in the Middle East that we're privy to.
Yeah, and now people are fighting over nonsense. So
in order to continue distracting us or ever getting a sense of what the hell is going on, while we continue to fund radical groups over there that just continue to destroy more of the history that exists. Either can destroy or hide.
Yeah. Well, everyone's constantly talking about the Azov battalion right now.
Azov.
Speaking of, funding people, Azov battalion or whatever they're called, they were invented in 2014, right before the Maidan events.
I thought that was through some sort of organization that was through the Open Society Foundation. I could be wrong there. I could be wrong, but I thought when Rich and I discussed
they were funded as a mercenary army.
That's right. They were basically like a stay-back army with and like they were propagandized with nationalistic ideals. The same sort of like, I should show you some of these documentaries my buddy from the Ukraine sends me. Like what they support as being their history as a people have somehow been completely separated and completely distinct from Russia is absurd. Completely ignoring the sort of Kiev Rus or Moscovia, the ideas of like Russia was never really unified. It was like principalities, like kingships that existed.
It's the world's largest country.
Yes.
And it has so many, like if you look at from the whole, Russia is not St. Petersburg or Moscow.
Right.
Go east. It has Siberia.
I was going to say
is right across from Alaska. I mean, it's ridiculous.
And plus, the ethnic groups that populate Russia are very distinct. So you get into more Asian ethnic groups or sort of Asian, sort of European sort of mixes. So it's, you think of the people that populate like areas of like Mongolia. Now it's a separate situation, but nonetheless, like they sort of bridge over into Russian territory. It's very completely different languages, culture. I mean, you're talking about people really of the steppe territory at that point. Where if you juxtapose that to like Western Russia, you're getting into like European history, Orthodox, Catholicism. I mean, just Western traditions to a certain extent. Western, I'm using this loosely because I don't like the term Western that much because it just embraces too much. It's too abstract.
And also, what is West? Like the Earth is round, so you can keep going west. So where does it stop?
I agree 100%. It's an important distinction because there's a lot of misunderstanding in regards to the history of the only time there's any unification was during the Battle of Kolka River, which is the famous battle when the Mongolians, when Chengiz sent his second in command, was a Kublai, I forget. Anyways, and he sent a contingent of 20,000 men to go explore Europe because he wanted to dominate Europe. And basically, it was this like a cascade effect of Bulgaria, what is now a region of Bulgaria was taken over. One after the other, you hear these stories of Pope Innocent II, like freaking out, like, who are these people? We've never heard or seen them before. And so Russia was threatened. Now, this isn't Russia. We're talking about like different kingships that existed. It's like 5 or 6 different families that were actually always warring with one another for a long time. The one time they come together as a sort of unified body was to fight this Mongol invasion, which was, by the way, not the Mongol army. We're talking about like a small like contingent subset that was released just to do like what's the word I'm looking for, but just to do sort of observation, to see what the West looks like. Anyways, they joined together and they go to fight the Mongols because they had no choice. So it's out of like solidarity. But the point is, like, Russia is a very and so same with the Ukraine. Like the Ottoman Empire controlled the Ukraine for a long time. Russia, I can't say it's Russia, but like different kingships that are associated with like Russian territory and history were part of the Ukraine. Like what do we define as Ukraine identity? They claim it's Cossacks. The Cossacks,
we have
like
to remember something.
very, good.
we always have to remember something. This ideal of nation states and national identity is a very new invention. It's a brand new concept. In, I don't know, 300,000 years of human existence or whatever it is, there has never been a unified nation state until the 1850s, 1860s. So there has always been city-states, small entities. People have never come together like now. Because right now, there was no such thing as French in the 17th century. They were from Paris, they were from Strasbourg, wherever they were from.
Right.
There was no such thing as Italian in 1830. There wasn't. You were Milanese, Genovese, whatever you were.
Right.
You were Roman.
Yeah.
Exactly. The Padawans, they had their own thing going on. So Venice was its own little kingdom. There were kings everywhere. There are periods where it is geographically Italy right now. There were 30 different kings, all within 2-hour driving distance.
Yeah.
So there is no such thing as a nation state until about, say, 150, 160 years ago. Right. So that's why we have to approach history from a more complex approach.
More nuance.
Yes. We can't just say, oh, they were all like this. They were all Mongolians. How are they all Mongolians? How many people were there? Did you count them? I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't know. They were all kinds of people. Sure. They just happened to be in that group at the time. Who's Russian? How do you define what a Russian is? How do you know that person, there wasn't an entire group of 5,000 people that did not migrate there from Anatolia 2,000 years ago.
Rich likes to bring up James H. Billington's book, Fire in the Minds of Men. Fantastic book. I actually found a first edition copy. Book. I found it. I didn't even know I had it. I found it when I was moving. I have it on one of my bookshelves here. But it's all wrapped up, and I'm like, oh man, I actually do have this book. Should really pull it out, because in there, one of the claims that's insinuated or implied, not directly sort of explicated, but is that in a way, and this is something that also Critique and Crisis, I forget the guy's name, but it essentially gets into Freemasonry and the Illuminati, but the historical true history of what happened there in the 18th and 19th century, more in the 18th century, this origin of the revolutionary faith in ways was sometimes supported by various kingships, or kingships were put in a situation where they could use it as a smokescreen. Like the British crown didn't stop existing because all of a sudden the United Kingdom began to exist. You know what I'm saying? Like it was a rebranding strategy. They used a concept of a nation state to act as though it has its own legitimate form of government, and that there's no private interests, no family interests, no historical interests in regards to aristocrats that exist in that area that don't still have major sway over that area. It gave them a great smokescreen to hide behind. And that is sort of implicit in Billington's work, is this idea of sort of like a rebranding technique that was utilized as a way to cover up, the fact that the kingships were under immense pressure for having a very conspicuous form of top-down control. And again, there wanted to be more participation by essentially what was emerging middle-class bourgeoisie, new oligarch class that wanted say in legislation. So what do? You give them that say. But it's not like there isn't still, but again, most of the nation state lines seem to have over time, in the 150 or 200 years of this experiment we call nation states, be drawn for resources, for certain familial connections, for certain financial connections. I alluded to the Sykes-Picot earlier, but they're not based on an ethnic sort of sense of solidarity or unity, whether ethnic or religious or other cultural forms. That's usually contrived. In other words, they're very artificial. The nation state is very artificial, and it's used as a construct to hide other individuals, usually kingships. kingdoms, aristocrats, landowners that exist already prior to that. So that's a very important element. It's a very
I mean, look at this country. This country is not what it was in 1700s.
Right.
So this is not the same America because, for instance, this was set up as a republic, was it not?
Yeah.
And
constitutional republic.
And in order to have constitutional republic, what do you need? You need free men. We don't have free men right now. If you're constantly, if you have to pay tax, you are not free men.
Right.
I live in a house. You live in a house. Everybody who's listening to this lives in a house. And those of us who are in the United States, they all know what kind of real estate tax we have to pay in order to live in our own houses. If you don't pay it, they'll come and take your house from you.
In other words, like you're renting your house perpetually from the government.
Correct. So if you cannot stop paying that, and that makes you not free. And that changes everything.
That's right.
You need free men who can own land in order to have a free constitutional republic. Currently, we don't have that because as long as you're paying real estate tax, you are not free.
Yeah, that's essentially.
Because you don't own your land. You don't own the land.
That's what the free men people try to argue in regards to constitutional liability. Because you refer to the Constitution, technically, there is no right to the ability to actually tax individuals the way in which we're being taxed. It's a loose, I forget it was which amendment to the Constitution. It would have been first article, like paragraph, second paragraph, I forget, where they outlined the limitations of government. And this is what's been I forget, I apologize me on my civics. Notice I believe it's in the first article, though. I can at least get that amount right, where they talk about the limitation of government. And this is what we call progressive, what's the word? Critical legal theory that's really attacked, which is this idea of the limitation of government as outlined under Article 1, section, can't remember the section, but anyways, I'll have to find it. But it's really important because this section has been what's been redefined tremendously as far as limitation of government and the purview of government. I really should say more than limitation. It's supposed to limit government, but it allows for the purview. And what they've done is they've ripped this apart in order to give way more power to both the executive and legislative branches of our government. And also the democracy portion was never something highlighted as being so overbearing. Same with the judicial branch of the government. So there's elements, really, you have to think of America as when we get industrialization, you're controlled by now families. You're controlled by the Carnegies or the Astors. You're talking about the railway system going out west. You're talking about Rockefellers controlling the oil supply. They're the ones that sort of build the modern day view of what America is and sort of the top-down control of America through their NGOs and through their philanthropic endeavors to, especially in social science departments and education, even in church. The Committee of Churches, I think, is controlled by Rockefeller, funded by Rockefeller, if I remember correctly. So it's like everything, they're all over the place. And again, we're talking about private individuals that have a vision for the future that is completely different, antithetical to the sort of charter, if you will, of the American idea, even though even that's built on a sort of store of blood in and of itself. Anyways, with that, I'm going to close it up here because I have to get to the rest of the episode, but amazing conversation. I can't thank you enough, Senna. You have a wealth of information.
Hey, anytime.
And, we'll have to have you back on again soon, discuss maybe more Foege, or maybe
something more fun. Let's talk about Templars or something. I'll tell you all about it.
We'll have to get on and talk about the EIS. We'll have to get see how Maddie and James are up to. Do some deep dives in that.
Yeah, maybe you should think about doing that at the end of the month. Rich and I are going to be at Pork Fest.
Oh yeah. I'll just say it.
I think we'll try to tune in, but that works. Join in, but yeah. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's a good idea. What I'll do is there is a town hall this Tuesday. I'm doing an every other week schedule. And if you want to come here with me and Senna, as we have many times, talk about some crazy stuff, especially because I'm more interested, and I need to get Matt Ehret back on. I want to talk about his article on Khazaria and the Renaissance that existed and has been. I want to talk about the sort of epistemological cartoon that's been built up around this idea of Ashkenazi Judaism and its relationship to the Khazaria Empire. And Ms. Senna, I might have you on for that because I know you have interesting information there as well. But I want to see if I can reach out to Matt. And I also want to have a discussion about the Venetian. Because like that's where I'm medieval and ancient history and its role in oligarchy, I'm much more interested in, have more knowledge about. Whereas I leave it to Rich to talk about the British Empire up to present and others. Not that I don't obviously know a lot now, thanks to spending so much time with him, but my penchant is for medieval and ancient history and philosophy more specifically. That's where I could drone forever. So if you want to find out more of the conversations we have in regards to that type of stuff, join the town halls. We also talk about current events, survival strategies, which I need to create a channel for that. We've been talking about sharing strategies and how to mitigate the fallout of what's coming in potentially the next 3 to 6 months. Basically the start of winter. It's where like the IMF, World Bank, and other institutions at BIS have been telling us, prepare for major shortages. I have no idea what that looks like. I don't know what type of manifestation, but we try to share strategies, ideas, ways to mitigate any potential harmful, deleterious impact that might have. So join the GTW this Tuesday night, 7 o'clock p.m., 7 to 10. It's really like 7 to 1 in the morning because that's what always happens because someone always asks me a question around 10:30. And I say, don't ask me about history or philosophy. There's a great conspiracy in the town hall, and I'm going to route out the infiltrators or the conspirators that do this to me.
We do it on purpose.
I know.
Sometime around 11 o'clock, somebody asks something about Phoenicia or,
Maybe we need a rule.
Hey, Tony. Something about Aristotle.
The late questions, you can ask them if you want to edit the town hall. And post it.
There we go. LD is my savior. Thank you. Thank God. That's what I'm going to allude to from now on. Yeah, you have to approve the question. So LD is going to be the one that has to approve the questions. That'll save me.
We'll have to skirt around that problem.
But amazing conversation. Thank you very much. I don't think a lot of people are aware of Bill Foege, so we have to be. It's important to be aware of some of these thought leaders.
Hopefully more people are aware because he's not a nice man. And he's, I think, more dangerous than Fauci because he is so influential and nobody knows who he is. And I think when you're not in the public eye and you do not owe anything to the public, as in he doesn't have to explain himself because he works for private corporations, that makes him a lot more dangerous than a Fauci type who's always
scrutinized
right up front. So he's someone to watch out for.
Yes. Well said. That's very important too. Rich always alludes to our unelected rulers, and there's a reason why. Fauci's part of that class. We're talking about the thinkers, the philosophers, the sort of statesmen behind these individuals because they don't have any sort of liability. Their hands are clean. They come up with these ideas and let other people take the fall for whatever manifests from however they put it into practice. So with that,
thanks so much for having me, guys. Thank you.
Have a great night.
I love this show.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
I appreciate it. You too.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Incredible.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions. We can get into the show, we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man.